Smoke, steel, and silent promises. The night blitz changed everything. Caleb was minutes from clocking out when dispatch muttered, "Probably joyriders," about a lone car fire on Highway 9. He rerouted Anyway Habit, or maybe Fate, and found a vehicle in full bloom of flame. Static crackled over the radio as he edged closer, but it was the sound that rose beneath the inferno, a strangled bark that froze him. 3 strikes of an extinguisher, shattered glass, searing heat against his face. He dragged out a dog, trussed like contraband, coat peeling in burnt patches, yet eyes blazing with clarity. Later, vets would discover a microchip linking the shepherd to Detective Lana Pierce, missing 2 weeks, presumed lost. That bark was more than fear. It was coordinates to a secret that powerful men planned to bury in ash. Press play if you're ready for a story where every step deeper into the woods uncovers another lie, where a scarred canine becomes the compass for justice, and where silence itself learns to howl. The night was the kind that settled deep into bone, not just cold, but hollow. In Ash Grove, late winter had a way of pressing its silence on everything. Pine trees stood like mourners along the highway, dusted with snow and swaying gently in the wind that whispered across their needles. The town was far behind now, its amber street lamps lost behind the ridge. Out here, it was just road, wind, and the kind of stillness that made you listen harder. Officer Caleb Rowan drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other gripping the radio mic out of habit. His patrol car hummed softly beneath him, the tires crackling over patches of ice and frozen gravel. The digital clock on the dash read 12:42 a.m. He was supposed to be off shift 20 minutes ago. A dull ache tugged at the base of his neck, and he rolled his shoulders once, trying to shake it off. But it wasn't just the cold making him tense. It was nights like this that drew things out of him, memories he didn't invite. The fire had happened when he was 11. He still smelled it sometimes. Not smoke exactly, but the moment right before it, that singed metal scent, sharp and sour, like the air had been sliced open. He'd carried his sister halfway down the stairs before the floor gave out. She'd slipped from his grip in the dark. The rest was heat, screaming, silence. His mother said it wasn't his fault, but the part of him that believed that never grew very big. The radio crackled suddenly, and his heart gave a quiet jolt. Unit 4-2, be advised, possible vehicle fire. Reported by mile marker 19, near the old service road. Caller unclear. Disconnected mid-report. Probably nothing. Probably nothing. Caleb's fingers tightened on the wheel. He didn't reply at first. The road curved, left up ahead, rising into a ridge where the tree line thickened. Somewhere beyond those woods was the old rail yard, and past that, nothing but hills and frost for miles. "Copy that," he said finally, voice low. "I'll check it." He took the next turn without signaling. Not that anyone was around to see. His headlights cut through the mist curling along the asphalt like breath, slicing into the darkness. Snow drifted across the hood in slow-motion flurries. Somewhere out in the trees, an owl called once sharp, then gone. He shouldn't have gone. He knew that. But a part of him never stopped looking for fires. Not to chase them, to answer them. It was a promise he never said out loud. The first glow came like a smudge against the tree line, flickering orange, pulsing faintly. As he drew closer, it brightened into flame. The shape of a vehicle emerged. An SUV, silver or gray once, now blackened in parts, leaning slightly where its front end had slammed into a snow-covered boulder. Flames licked hungrily at the undercarriage. One headlight sputtered like a dying eye. Smoke rolled up into the night, thick and greasy. Caleb pulled over, threw the cruiser into park. He stepped out quickly, grabbing the fire extinguisher from the trunk with practiced hands. The cold slapped him across the face, immediate and sharp. "Dispatch," he said into the mic clipped to his shoulder. "Confirmed vehicle fire, no visible passengers. Location, marker 19, northbound turnout near Ridge Hollow." He stepped closer, boots crunching over the icy gravel. Then he heard it. Not a human voice, not the groan of metal or the hiss of flame. A bark, short, raw, choked. He froze, every muscle locking tight. Then again, higher this time. Desperate. A scraping sound followed, something frantic against glass. Caleb's pulse kicked hard in his neck. He ran. Up close, the SUV was a mess. The windshield spider-webbed with cracks. Blood smeared across the passenger side. All doors locked. The back window blackened, but intact. He stepped to the side and peered through the rear. That's when he saw it. A dog. German Shepherd, medium build, wedged in the back seat. Its fur, black and tan, was soaked in soot and ash. Thick zip ties pinned its front legs and snout. Its chest heaved in shallow bursts. One eye was swollen shut. Burns along its flank. One ear torn. It didn't growl. Didn't bite. It just looked at him. The kind of look that stays with you. Caleb dropped to one knee and slammed the extinguisher against the window. Once. Twice. The third time, the glass gave way with a deafening crack. Heat surged outward, blistering. Smoke poured out like a scream. He covered his arm with his jacket and reached inside. The dog whined softly. Caleb found the ties, his fingers trembling. He drew his pocket knife and began to saw. It felt like forever. Plastic flexed, gave. "You're okay," he muttered through coughing. "Just hold on." The final tie snapped. He grabbed the dog by the scruff, pulled. They tumbled out together, hitting the snow as the gas tank exploded behind them in a wave of sound and fire. The force knocked the breath from his lungs. For a second, neither of them moved. Then the dog shifted, curling instinctively into Caleb's chest. Its breathing was ragged, but there, alive. Snow began to fall again. Light at first, then heavier. Black flakes of ash drifted with it, swirling like cinders from a broken sky. Caleb sat up slowly. The heat from the wreck sizzled against the cold air. His heart thudded hard. His hands were shaking, not from cold. He looked down at the dog, its body twitching faintly, eyes still on him. "You're not just a stray, are you?" he whispered. And for the first time in a long while, something inside Caleb shifted. A feeling he thought had burned away years ago, the fragile ember of purpose. This wasn't just rescue, this was beginning. The smell hit him first, sharp, chemical, with the bite of burning oil and something darker beneath. Officer Caleb Rowan crouched low, the fire extinguisher heavy in his grip, steam rising off the snow around his boots. The SUV crackled as flame crept from the hood to the wheel well. Its heat licking the air with an almost sentient hunger. He circled wide, scanning through the windshield. The glass was fractured, veined like brittle ice. A spray of blood frozen on the inside of the passenger side. But there was no movement in the front seats, no outline of a driver. The dashboard had begun to melt, dials warping like soft wax under a blowtorch. No one had walked away from this, but someone or something was still inside. Caleb's breath clouded in front of him as he edged closer to the rear window, stepping sideways against the pitch-black smoke. It stung his eyes. The snow had begun again, drifting down in slow flakes that sizzled as they hit the metal. That's when he heard it again. A bark. Ragged, muffled, cut off mid-yelp. Not angry afraid. He moved fast, instincts overriding the cold that gripped his fingers. He dropped to one knee beside the back door, wiped at the soot on the rear glass with his jacket sleeve, and peered inside. There in the shadows beyond the smoke, a shape, low, pressed against the seat. A dog. German Shepherd. Not large, but compact and lean. A dark muzzle bound tight by a plastic zip tie. Front legs pulled taut beneath its chest, twisted in more industrial-grade ties that cinched down through the seatbelt loops. The fur on its side had blackened. Steam rose off, burns across its flank. One of its hind legs was twitching, but barely, and its eyes wide, glassy, reflecting the flame outside and something else underneath. Terror, but not panic. Recognition. It was watching him. The air inside the car had turned orange from the blaze outside. Flames now curled up the frame like fingers grasping for something to pull under. Caleb stood and slammed the extinguisher into the rear window. It bounced off the first time, leaving a hairline fracture. He cursed under his breath, struck again. The second hit deepened the cracks. On the third, the glass gave way with a shattering scream of release, and a wall of smoke burst out, wrapping around his face. He turned away, coughing. Then, without hesitation, he plunged his jacket-wrapped arm into the inferno. The heat clawed at him, blistering even through the layers. He found the first tie plastic, thick, and yanked. It didn't budge. The dog let out a low, strangled whimper, but didn't flinch, didn't fight. Just waited. Caleb's hand fumbled down to his belt. fingers numb, found the small folding blade he always carried. He flipped it open with his thumb, awkwardly, and began sawing through the zip tie at the dog's muzzle first. The plastic cracked. The dog's tongue slipped out, pink against the char. "You're okay," he rasped. Just give me a second." One by one, he sliced through the restraints. Every moment, the heat pressed closer, the engine beginning to hiss, the metal of the car groaning from internal pressure. There wasn't time. The final tie snapped. "Got you." He gripped the scruff of the dog's neck, slid his arms under its chest, and pulled. The shepherd yelped as its legs scraped the broken glass, but it didn't resist. It tried to help. One weak kick, then another. Together, they tumbled backward out of the window just as a dull thum shook the ground beneath them. A secondary ignition in the front sent a fireball roaring up from the hood, lighting the trees in flashes of orange and red. Caleb landed in the snow. The shepherd curled into his chest like a child clinging to warmth. Heat followed them, a sudden rush that baked the snow around them into steam. Ash fell like black confetti. Tiny embers spun in the air. The SUV behind them sagged in on itself, flames wrapping up the sides until the whole frame glowed red. Caleb coughed, his chest heaving. The dog didn't move. "Hey," he muttered, voice raw. "Stay with me." He sat up slowly, arms still around the dog. The snow was wet beneath him now, soaked through to the skin. He peeled his coat open and pulled the shepherd into it, wrapping it tight. The dog shivered once, a long, trembling motion, and then exhaled. Still alive. Caleb tilted its chin gently, checking the burns. One eye nearly swollen shut. Bleeding paw pads, burned ear. But the breathing was shallow, steady. "You're damn lucky," he whispered. The shepherd blinked. Its gaze found him again, this time softer, resigned. "But then again," he said, brushing ash from its brow. "So am I." He sat there for a while, not caring about the wet snow or the rising cold or the ache starting in his shoulder. Around them, the forest was quiet again, save for the distant pop of something flammable in the wreck. Then he noticed it. On the dog's hind leg, near the haunch beneath the grime and the blood, a brand. Not a scar, a recent burn, still red, edges blistered. 3 letters, SCP. He frowned. It wasn't a kennel code, not a rescue ID. It looked almost official, stamped, purposeful. His stomach turned. Whatever this dog had been involved in, it wasn't random. He pulled his radio back to his mouth, voice hoarse. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4-2. Request immediate veterinary support at my location. 1 K9 survivor. No visible tags. Regulation harness fragments suggest active duty origin. Dog is injured but stable." He looked down again. The shepherd was watching him. Still, quiet, ears barely twitching. "You weren't supposed to be found," Caleb said softly. "But you were." He reached out, fingers brushing the matted fur gently, as if offering a silent vow. "We're going to figure this out." The forest had gone still. Caleb crouched beside the cruiser with the shepherd pressed close to his thigh, wrapped loosely in a thermal blanket he'd grabbed from the back seat. The SUV burned behind them, flames now reduced to a simmering wreckage, the metal popping and groaning as it cooled. Smoke curled upward, joining the night sky like a slow-moving spirit. The dog didn't make a sound. Its body trembled occasionally, not from fear, Caleb realized, but from exhaustion, a trembling born of muscle memory still trying to obey commands that no longer came. He laid the dog carefully onto the back seat of his patrol car, cradling it like something fragile. The shepherd didn't resist, only let out a shallow exhale as its burned paw brushed the vinyl seat. Under the dome light, the damage came into focus. The zip ties had carved deep lines into its limbs. Fur was matted with dried blood, ash and oil. The black and tan coat, so familiar in form, had patchy burns along the right side, where flame had clearly licked too close. One ear sagged at the tip, where the cartilage had likely melted. And beneath the ruined harness, now little more than melted nylon and metal nubs, was a squared impression on the fur, a clean line, the kind left behind by a regulation K9 vest. No tag, no name, but not just a stray. Caleb brushed the fur back from the dog's side, and that's when he saw it again, clearer, now under the light. A brand, freshly seared into the skin just above the rear leg. 3 letters, block print, precise, SCP. The skin around the edges was inflamed, recent. The lines still puckered, the scabbing thin. It hadn't been done for identification. No vet would have branded a dog there. It was too exposed, too painful. He swallowed hard. "Who did this to you?" he murmured. The shepherd stirred faintly at his voice. Caleb reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small first aid kit. He cracked a saline packet and gently cleaned around the brand, careful not to press too hard. The dog didn't whimper, didn't growl. Just watched him, that same steady, bone-deep gaze. "This wasn't an accident," he said quietly. "Someone wanted you gone." The truth was beginning to take shape, slow but sure, like footprints rising in snow. This dog wasn't just abandoned. It was disposed of deliberately, silenced, left in a fire meant to erase whatever it had seen, whatever it knew. But it had survived. And now it was here, burned but breathing, looking at Caleb like it remembered more than it should. He leaned back in the seat and exhaled, fogging up the window beside him. His breath trembled. A long time ago, Caleb had stood in another fire, carrying someone too light, skin blistering beneath his arms, the hallway behind him swallowing everything in red. Back then, no one came for him. No one pulled him out. He'd lived with that silence ever since. But this dog, this German shepherd with branded flesh and broken paws, had looked at him from the flame and waited, like it knew he would come, like it trusted that someone still would. A flicker of movement snapped him back. The shepherd shifted its weight, trying to raise its head. Caleb moved quickly to help, sliding his arm beneath its neck and steadying it. The dog leaned slightly into the contact, eyes half-lidded but alert. "You were trained," he whispered. "Weren't you?" He ran a hand along the dog's shoulders, careful around the burns. The tension in the muscle was unmistakable, lean, coiled strength beneath injury. The kind bred from structure, from hours of drills and commands. Caleb had seen dogs like this before, worked beside them on raids, trusted them with his back in the dark. But there was no record of a missing K9, no alerts. So where had this one come from? And why hadn't anyone come looking? A gust of wind rattled the branches outside, sending snow cascading from an overhanging limb. Caleb looked toward the tree line, suddenly aware of how quiet it was, how cut off. His fingers traced once more along the brand. "SCP," he said aloud. "What is that?" The shepherd blinked, then closed its eyes again, as if too tired to answer. Caleb let the silence settle between them. Not just a stray, not just a survivor, a ghost, one someone tried very hard to erase. He reached up and turned the ignition. The cruiser's heater roared to life, blowing warm air into the cabin. The shepherd let out a low sigh, curling slightly beneath the blanket. Caleb sat there for a long moment, watching the dog. "You weren't supposed to make it out," he said finally. "But you did." The words felt heavier than they should, like they belonged to both of them. And outside, through the frost-laced windshield, the remains of the SUV still smoked, the blaze now just ember and ruin. But something else had survived that night. Not just the dog. Something older. Something quieter. A reason. The town of Ashgrove still slept when Caleb turned onto the narrow side street behind the Hollow Ridge Veterinary Clinic. The lot was empty. The only light, a soft glow spilling from the second-story window, pale and warm against the slate-gray morning. He killed the engine. The cruiser ticked as it cooled, engine warmth bleeding into the frozen air. For a moment, he didn't move. He just sat there, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other on the sleeping form in the back seat. The shepherd, still wrapped in the blanket, hadn't stirred since they left the burn site. He'd curled tighter during the drive, ears flicking at sharp turns and rough pavement, but otherwise silent. Caleb had kept his eyes on the road, but his thoughts had been with the dog the entire time, this quiet shadow who had no name, no handler, and yet had looked into fire like he'd seen it before. He stepped out slowly, the cold biting through his jeans, and opened the back door. The dog blinked up at him, eyes bloodshot but aware. Caleb crouched low. "Easy," he murmured. "Just a little farther." He lifted the shepherd carefully into his arms. The dog tensed but didn't resist. Burns along his side brushed against Caleb's coat, and he felt the shudder that passed through the animal's body. The clinic door creaked as he pushed through. The smell hit him first antiseptic and cedar wood. It hadn't changed. The same soft hum of fluorescent lights. The same stack of outdated wildlife calendars behind the counter. Footsteps echoed from the back light, deliberate, unhurried. Then she appeared. May Whitmore. She moved with the calm precision of someone who had learned to breathe through chaos. Her scrubs were dark gray beneath a long white coat, sleeves rolled to the elbows. A towel hung over one shoulder, and in her left hand, she held a clipboard. Caleb hadn't seen her in over 5 years. She stopped in the doorway. For a moment, her body went utterly still, like memory had found her first. Her fingers curled tighter around the clipboard. "Caleb," she said, voice low, almost a question. "Hey, Mai." Silence hung between them, stretching across years, across unsent messages and long drives that ended nowhere. May looked down at the bundle in his arms. Her eyes narrowed. "Is that?" "I pulled him out of a burning car," Caleb said. "About 40 minutes ago. He was tied down, zip ties, no ID. She stepped forward, her movements suddenly all instinct and training. The hesitation melted into action. "Bring him in," she said, her voice clipped. Table 2. Caleb followed her into the exam room. The walls were the same, off-white, the counters lined with labeled drawers and soft-lit monitors. He laid the shepherd gently on the steel table. The dog whined once, not from fear, but pain. May flipped on the overhead lamp, her expression tightening as the light revealed more damage. She began to speak to herself as she examined the injuries. Voice clinical, 4 or 5 years old, male. Second-degree burns across the right flank, foreleg abrasions, muzzle swelling. She paused, then reached beneath the fur near the dog's neck. "There's a bump here, subcutaneous." Caleb nodded. "Chip? Let's find out." She crossed the room, grabbed a handheld scanner from its charger, and ran it along the dog's shoulder. A soft beep. The screen blinked. May frowned. "Got it." She tapped quickly on the nearby keyboard, pulling up the data. Caleb stepped closer. "What's it say?" May's brow furrowed. "Name: Blitz. ID: 1104CK9. Registered under the Special Response Unit, Denver Metro." Caleb froze. "And the handler?" She read aloud. "Detective Lana Pierce." The name hit like a jolt. Lana Pierce. She'd gone missing 2 weeks ago while investigating the Crestview trafficking case. Her photo had been up on the bulletin board at the precinct. They'd said she went hiking off duty. Got lost. Disappeared. But no one ever mentioned her canine partner. Caleb swallowed. She wouldn't have left him. Not like that. "No," May said softly. "She wouldn't." Blitz stirred under the light. His eyes opened briefly, searching, then shut again. May watched him for a long moment. Then she looked at Caleb, really looked. "You were bleeding last time I saw you," she said, not unkindly. "And you were screaming at me in the rain?" A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Yeah, I was." Their silence wasn't empty. It carried years. Once, she had waited for him to come home from a place he never talked about. Once, he had asked her to wait longer, and she had finally said no. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said, quieter now. "I didn't think I would either." They stood like that, not touching, not explaining, just breathing in the same room again. Finally, May pulled a tray of supplies toward her. "Help me sedate him. I need to treat those burns before infection sets in." Caleb moved to the other side of the table, resting a hand on Blitz's head. The shepherd blinked once at him, slow and deliberate. "You've still got a fight in you," Caleb whispered. "I can feel it." May prepped a syringe. "He's lucky you found him." "I don't think it was luck." She met his eyes. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition of pain carried and not spoken, of old scars reopened. May pressed the needle gently into Blitz's flank. "We'll save him," she said, "whatever it takes." And in that small, sterile room, where the past hung in the air like dust, something old began to stir a thread of purpose neither of them had held in years. The clinic lights hummed softly overhead, casting a pale glow across the exam table where the German shepherd lay motionless now, except for the slow rise and fall of his chest. A heating pad warmed the steel beneath him. His fur, singed and patched, had begun to dry in tufts along his ribs. where May had gently applied ointment and gauze. Caleb stood nearby, arms crossed tightly, the weight of the last hour pressing into the base of his spine like an old injury. He hadn't sat down. Couldn't. His eyes kept returning to the screen on the clinic computer, still showing the basic chip data May had pulled. Name: Blitz. Breed: German Shepherd. Age: 5. Id: Dis 1804. Minus K9. Handler: Detective Lana Pierce. Division: Denver Metro PD. Special Response Unit. He read the words again, as if they'd change, as if some part of him hadn't already accepted them. May finished adjusting the IV line and turned back to the screen, her brow furrowed. No reports of him being retired, she said. No transfer of custody. Nothing. Blitz was still listed as active. Caleb exhaled through his nose. And yet, no one's looking for him. She glanced at him. And no one's looking very hard for Lana either, are they? Caleb shook his head. 2 weeks ago, Lana Pierce, smart, relentless, the kind of detective who didn't back off even when the brass told her to, had vanished during what the department had called a personal weekend retreat. That was the official story. Off duty. Hike gone wrong. No foul play suspected. But Caleb remembered the last time he'd seen her at the precinct's memorial event. She'd worn a navy jacket, her badge clipped to the inside pocket. There was tension in her smile, something guarded behind her laugh. She'd hugged him briefly and whispered near his ear, "There's something wrong in the city, Caleb. People are going missing. Kids, women. I think it's inside the department." He hadn't asked then. He hadn't wanted to know. And now Blitz lay on this table, burned, scarred, and branded like someone had tried to burn away the trails she left behind. Caleb rubbed a hand across his face. She never would have left him. Never. May sat beside the table, her voice quieter now. "That's what K9 handlers say. But with Lana, I believe it." The room held a long silence. Blitz stirred then, legs twitching faintly. His breathing hitched, then steadied. He let out a sound, low, guttural, somewhere between a growl and a sigh. May leaned closer, her hand hovering just above his ear. "He's dreaming," she said softly. Caleb watched him, the tension in the dog's jaw, the tremble along his spine. "No," he murmured. "He's remembering." A sudden rasp of claws against tiles startled them both. Blitz's legs kicked. He struggled to rise, one forepaw sliding out from under him. "Easy!" May moved quickly to steady him, but Blitz wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at Caleb either. His head jerked toward the exam room window. A growl bloomed in his throat, deep and low, vibrating through his chest. The sound was primal, not fear, not warning, but recognition. May followed his gaze, frowning. "What is it?" Caleb turned to the window. Frost traced the glass in branching white fingers. Beyond it, the narrow alley that ran between the clinic and the old hardware store. Empty. A tipped trash can. A street lamp flickering in the distance. But Blitz's eyes had locked onto something Caleb couldn't see, something his instincts hadn't forgotten. Someone was watching, Caleb said. Blitz's growl deepened. His ears flattened. He struggled to stand, one leg buckling. May tried to hold him down gently, but he barked once, sharp and guttural, staring into the darkness beyond the glass. Caleb stepped toward the window and opened it with a quiet creak. The air rushed in, bitter and biting. He scanned the alley. Nothing. But he didn't need proof. The shepherd's body told him everything. Whoever had tried to kill this dog hadn't just failed. They knew he'd survived. And now they were watching to see what he would remember. May stood back, her face pale. "Caleb, if whoever did this knows Blitz is alive, they'll come back," he finished for her. He looked at Blitz, the shepherd still trembling, nostrils flaring, eyes wide but focused. "He knows something," Caleb whispered. "He's trying to tell us." For a long second, no one moved. Then May closed the window and drew the blinds. "I'll sedate him lightly," she said, regaining the calm of a professional. "Just enough to ease the pain, but he needs rest and protection." Caleb nodded. "He stays with me." May hesitated. "You're not his handler." "No," Caleb said, eyes still on the shepherd. "But he chose me anyway." Blitz let out a low, guttural breath, not quite a growl, but not relaxed either. still watching, still tracking. Caleb placed a hand gently on the dog's chest. "I've got you," he said. "You're not alone." And this time, Blitz didn't pull away. May's hands moved with quiet purpose, drawing the syringe with practiced steadiness. The clinic light above them had dimmed slightly, and the hum of the space heater blended with the shallow rhythm of Blitz's breathing. The German shepherd still lay alert on the exam table, body tense, but still. His eyes hadn't left the now shuttered window. Caleb stood nearby, one hand resting gently on Blitz's shoulder, anchoring the dog with something wordless. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. "He's running hot," May murmured, examining the dog's ear. "Pain, adrenaline, possible early infection. I'm giving him a low dose enough to ease him, not knock him out completely." Caleb nodded, but didn't speak. May injected the sedative into the muscle of Blitz's flank with a whisper of motion. The shepherd flinched, but didn't growl. His eyes blinked slowly, then stayed half-lidded, body gradually relaxing into something more pliant. Not sleep, just relief. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Caleb leaned back against the counter. His eyes were tired, shadowed with something older than exhaustion. He looked at Blitz, then at May. "If Lana's alive," he said finally, "he's the only one who knows." May looked up. Caleb's voice didn't shake, but something beneath it did. The brand on his leg, the way he was tied down. That wasn't a rescue gone bad. Someone was trying to erase him. May didn't argue. She didn't need to. The signs were everywhere, the fresh brand, the missing handler, the silence from Denver PD. Blitz hadn't been misplaced. He'd been disposed of, silenced, buried in flame, and left to die. But he hadn't. May crossed her arms, leaning against the opposite counter. "Then they didn't plan for someone like you to show up." He huffed out a bitter breath. "They never do." Outside, the wind picked up, scraping bare branches against the roof. Somewhere in the dark, a snowplow groaned as it moved along Main Street. The town was waking slowly, unaware that something forgotten had just begun to stir in the back room of a clinic lit by fluorescent ghosts. May pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her voice softer now. "You're not planning to hand this over to the precinct, are you?" Caleb didn't answer right away. His eyes were on Blitz, the steady rise and fall of the dog's flank, the gauze taped neatly over the burn, the ear that would never stand straight again. "No," he said finally. "If I take this up the chain, it disappears. Like Lana did." May's jaw tensed, but her gaze didn't waver. "You're sure?" "She came to me," he said, almost to himself. 3 weeks ago, at the memorial, she said there was something wrong, something inside the department. Kids vanishing, evidence missing. She was scared. But she wouldn't leave him. Not willingly. May's eyes softened, the calculation in her expression giving way to something older. "Then we follow him," she said simply. "Wherever he leads." The words settled like an oath. Caleb looked at her, not with surprise, but with the silent gratitude of someone who'd been alone too long and finally found someone who didn't need the whole map to take the first step. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm a vet in a town that's forgotten how to ask hard questions," May replied. "I help animals, Caleb. Not just patch them up. I listen to them. And this one." She nodded toward Blitz. "This one's still trying to speak." He nodded. "Then we keep him safe." They stood in silence, letting the decision solidify in the room. Blitz shifted, a low exhale rising from his chest. Caleb stepped closer and placed a palm gently on the shepherd's neck. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering. "I don't know what he saw," Caleb said, voice low. "But someone burned a piece of it into his skin. That kind of pain doesn't fade. It stays. In the bones, in the breath." May glanced at him. "Like yours?" He didn't answer. "Didn't have to. In another life, he might have found peace in some other job. A slower one. One without late-night radio calls or the smell of smoke in his jacket. But fire had shaped him just like it had shaped this dog. And maybe, in some strange way, they'd been meant to find each other. Not for justice, not even for Lana, but because no one else would understand what it meant to crawl out of flame and still keep going. Blitz let out a soft sound, not pain, but presence. A dog's way of saying, "I'm still here." May placed a warm blanket over him. "He'll sleep a few hours. The sedative's mild. He'll need time to heal before he can stand for long." let alone track. Caleb nodded. I'm not in a hurry. Oh. He pulled a chair from the wall and sat beside the table. His body was tired, but his mind had already begun piecing things together: the location of the burn site, the missing case file from the department, the absence of Lana's name from every update. Something foul was moving beneath the surface, and Blitz had been its witness. May lingered a moment longer before turning off the overhead lamp, leaving only the side light near the desk. The shadows softened. The clinic grew quiet. As she stepped out, she paused in the doorway. You'll stay? Caleb didn't look up. Yeah, I'm not leaving him alone. May held his gaze for a beat longer, then nodded once and disappeared into the back hallway. In the hush that followed, Caleb sat with his hand resting on the shepherd's side, matching its slow rhythm with his own breath. He didn't know what they were about to uncover, but for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he needed to be, and he wasn't alone. Not anymore. Ashgrove's precinct building loomed quiet beneath a bruised evening sky. A cold wind stirred wrappers across the parking lot, nudging a toppled orange cone near the back service door. The main lobby lights were off. A single lamplight burned in the records office window, like a forgotten watchman. Caleb stood in the shadow between two cruisers, coat collar turned up, hat low. The town was small enough that shifts thinned at night. 2 patrols out, maybe 1 inside doing paperwork. He watched the entrance for another beat, hand resting on his hip, near but not on the weapon holstered beneath his coat. He wasn't supposed to be here. His ID had been marked inactive duty weeks ago. Desk assignment only after his last field rotation turned into a fractured wrist and a departmental review. But old habits die hard, and bureaucracy dies slower, especially in a place like Ashgrove, where the computers were still 3 versions behind and the locks hadn't been changed in over a year. He moved fast. Caleb slipped through the side door with an old access card, one that should have been deactivated but hadn't been. The lock clicked green. He stepped into a dim corridor lined with plastic chairs, dusty plaques, and the smell of paper, bleach, and faint coffee. The hum of the vending machine at the end of the hall was the only sound. He kept his head down as he passed the dispatch window. It was empty, save for an open binder and a half-eaten granola bar. He turned the corner, boots soft against the linoleum, and made for the old server room tucked beside evidence lockup. The door wasn't locked, just stiff. Inside, the room was colder, probably by a few degrees. It always had been. No windows, no noise, but the low whir of fans spinning inside ancient towers of blinking lights. The computers here weren't supposed to be connected to the internet, internal systems only, which made what was inside all the more buried and valuable. He closed the door quietly behind him. There was a desk against the back wall, monitor asleep, keyboard covered in a thin layer of dust. He jiggled the mouse. The screen flickered to life. Login required. Caleb's fingers hovered. He hadn't used his narcotics division credentials in nearly 2 years. He still remembered the password. The exact moment he created it back when he still believed you could clean up rot with paperwork and raids. He typed, Rowan, C87, Ascesis, Ether 19. The screen loaded. A slow blink, then a dashboard appeared. Internal database, case files, archives. Still worked. Caleb breathed through his nose. Steady. He navigated to the restricted search bar and typed Lana Pierce, Crestview case. Nothing. He adjusted the filter. Audio logs, field notes, unfiled entries. Something blinked. File name OV7D. Prelum. Yave. MP. 3. Timestamp. 6 days before Pierce's disappearance. Format. Personnel voice log. Status. Not cataloged. Internal note. Pending review. He clicked it. The speakers crackled. Then, Detective Lana Pierce. Case log. Codename Hawk. Her voice. Flat. Controlled. The way officers sound when they're forcing calm through the static. Suspected department insider. Possibly rank above sergeant. I can't confirm identity yet, but it's someone with access to shift logs and transport manifests. Caleb froze. Pattern inconsistencies match what I found in the Crestview trafficking reports. Edited timestamps, ghost shifts, kids rerouted, unlisted drop points. She hesitated, then whispered, "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it." The log ended with a digital click. Caleb stared at the screen. Hawk. The name had circled narcotics units for years. A ghost. An alleged high-ranking leak, always out of reach, never on paper. The kind of name you heard in after-hours conversations and midnight regrets. He leaned back in the chair, one hand on the desk, the other gripping the armrest. Lana had been close, too close, and someone had found her. The dog hadn't been the target. Lana was. The door creaked behind him. Caleb jumped, hand flying to his sidearm, but it was empty space. Just the air vent settling. He exhaled slowly and leaned forward, copying the file to a blank USB he'd pulled from his jacket. As he worked, movement stirred beneath the desk. Blitz. The shepherd had followed him in, quiet as shadow, and curled up beneath the table. Caleb hadn't even noticed when he'd nudged the door open. Now the dog lay still, but alert, eyes wide and trained on the hallway. When Lana's voice had come through the speaker, Blitz had stirred. Saturday up, ears twitching. A low, unfamiliar whine had risen in his throat. And now, he hadn't moved since. Caleb crouched beside him, ran a hand gently through the fur along Blitz's back, still patchy, but warmer now. Healing. You knew, he said softly. You were with her when she recorded that. Blitz's head turned, slowly, toward him. Eyes met eyes. There was no bark, no growl, just the steady presence of something that had survived what others didn't. Caleb stood, slid the USB into his coat, and shut down the monitor. The file was enough to blow open what was left of the department's official story. But that wasn't the point. The point was Lana, and Blitz, the dog who carried her silence. We're not going through channels, Caleb murmured. We go where you remember. That's how we find her. Blitz rose, stiff but steady. He was ready. The USB drive sat on the passenger seat, its black casing barely visible beneath the edge of Caleb's glove. Outside the windshield, the streets of Ashgrove slid past in shadow and frost. It was well after midnight now that hour, when even the bad decisions were sleeping. Beside him, Blitz sat upright. The shepherd's head was tilted slightly, ears twitching with every change in engine tone. He wasn't asleep. He hadn't rested much since hearing Lana's voice. Back in the server room, the moment her recording had played, something had changed in him. His body went rigid, his breath shallow. And when the word Hawk came through the speakers, the growl that rose from his throat hadn't been fear. It had been recognition. Caleb had seen that look before in soldiers who came back from things they couldn't name. In their eyes, always something unfinished. A door left open behind the gaze. He stopped the cruiser at the edge of a turnout near the industrial lot, a wide gravel patch behind a shuttered mechanic shop. There was no patrol here, no cameras, just dark. Safe enough. Caleb pulled the laptop from the back seat, placed it on the dash, and slid the USB into the port. He leaned back in the driver's seat and hit play. Lana's voice crackled again, low and focused. Codename Hawk. Suspected department insider, possibly above sergeant rank. No photos, no formal mention. But the patterns align. Every botched raid from 2016 to 2021, same shift anomalies. Same officers rerouted. Same missing victims. Caleb's fingers tapped against the steering wheel as her words sank in. It's like a shadow. I found a reference once scribbled in pencil at the bottom of an old narcotics report. The Hawk sees through walls. That's all it said. That's all anyone wrote. But the way people talk around it? Like it's someone you don't name out loud. Caleb remembered. The name Hawk had surfaced during his narcotics stint, whispered, never logged. Always in connection with failures that felt too perfect to be coincidence. Raids that arrived minutes too late. Undercover units compromised before they stepped out the door. Witnesses who changed stories overnight or vanished entirely. And then the internal reviews. Sealed, buried, labeled equipment failure, intel miscommunication. No further investigation recommended. The Hawk had been a ghost. Until Lana. I think I'm being watched. I think I was followed 2 nights ago. If anything happens to me, Blitz will know. He was trained for more than perimeter. He remembers voice, intent, smell. If I don't make it, you follow him. Caleb looked at Blitz, who was now sitting with his chest square and his gaze locked not on the screen but on the darkness outside the window. His ears flicked forward once, twice. Then, stilled. Caleb reached out slowly, placing a hand on the dog's neck. "You knew," he said, voice a hush. "You remember her voice. You remember what she said." Blitz didn't move, just sat there, breathing low and steady, tail still, like the sound had pulled him back into something he hadn't left. Caleb played the clip again, not the whole log, just the part that mattered. The hawk sees through walls. That was when Blitz responded. Not with a growl this time, but a low, keening sound, throat tight, almost like grief. His eyes darted once, to the dashboard, then back toward the window again. Caleb followed the gaze, but there was nothing outside. Just the frost-dusted trees lining the edge of the lot and a telephone pole humming faintly in the wind. Still, something clenched in his chest. Because the dog knew. Because some part of him had never stopped listening. And suddenly, the pieces clicked. Blitz hadn't just survived the fire. He'd escaped it, which meant someone had lit that fire, knowing the dog was still inside. Which meant the hawk wasn't just a ghost in the system, they were someone real, someone with badge access, someone who knew exactly what Blitz could reveal if he lived long enough. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on the wheel. The engine ticked as it cooled. Whoever Lana had uncovered, she hadn't been bluffing. She hadn't lost her mind. She'd gotten close enough to make someone nervous, close enough to make them try to burn the evidence. And Blitz? Blitz was the evidence. "What else did she teach you?" Caleb whispered, glancing at the shepherd. Blitz turned his head toward him, slow and deliberate. Their eyes met. Not a pet, not a stray, a partner without a voice but full of memory. A slow breath escaped Caleb's lips. For the first time, the lines between man and dog weren't blurry, they were clear. They were the same. Both carried something burned. Both were haunted by what they didn't stop. And both had made it through the fire because of someone they couldn't yet name. "You lead," Caleb murmured. "I'll follow." Blitz didn't move, but his ears perked. A signal. And in that moment, Caleb understood. He wasn't hunting a name. He was walking behind something older than that loyalty. Memory. The kind that doesn't need words, only footsteps in snow. The motel room was quiet, but not still. It breathed, in small ways, the hum of the radiator under the window, the soft drip of a leaky bathroom tap, the faint rustle of snow drifting against the outside pane. Caleb sat at the edge of the bed, boots unlaced, coat still on. Blitz lay curled on a folded comforter by the door, wrapped in the same blanket he'd been rescued in, paws twitching faintly in his sleep. The night pressed against the windows like a memory trying to get in. And eventually, it did. Caleb didn't mean to fall into it, not the way he always did, not like falling asleep. It came instead like a scent, like a crack in the silence. One moment he was staring at the grain in the motel dresser, the next, smoke. He was 11 again. The air was thick, orange, alive. The hallway glowed like an oven left open too long. He was barefoot, screaming, holding her hand. "Come on, Josie, we have to go." The door wouldn't open. Paint peeled in strips. Flames crawled up the wall like they belonged there. He'd wrapped her in a coat, lifted her with everything his small frame could offer. Her coughs rattled in his chest, like something trying to escape. He remembered the sound her shoes made when they dropped behind him, tap, 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 as she slipped through his arms. The firefighters found him at the top of the stairs, collapsed from smoke, one arm still reaching back. Josie had already stopped breathing. The paper said accident, said bravery, said he'd done everything he could. But the truth was simpler. He hadn't moved fast enough. He'd hesitated. Frozen. Thought someone else would come. That sirens always meant salvation. He hadn't known that sometimes. No one makes it in time. Caleb blinked. The motel room came back slowly, folding itself around him like fabric settling over skin. His hands were clenched. He forced them open. His palms were damp. Across the room, Blitz raised his head. The shepherd didn't bark or move, just looked at him, unblinking. "I remember," Caleb whispered. Blitz shifted his weight, laid his head down again, but didn't look away. Caleb stood, walked slowly to the window, and stared out. The town stretched below dim yellow streetlights, lining narrow lanes, snow-laced rooftops, shadows under every porch. He could almost hear the fire sirens from years ago, not from Ashgrove, but from then, that day. He pressed his hand to the cold glass. I ignored the first fire, he said aloud. Told myself someone else would get there. Told myself I was just a kid. A pause, then a breath. His voice firmer now. But I'm not a kid anymore. Behind him, Blitz let out a soft exhale. It sounded almost like approval. Caleb turned back toward him. You were the one in the fire this time, he said. And you didn't wait for anyone either. You tried to save her, didn't you? Blitz didn't move. But something flickered in his eyes, a memory Caleb couldn't reach, but felt. She trusted you, Caleb went on. And now you're the only one who remembers where she went, what she saw, who she was afraid of. His fists clenched again. Not from guilt this time, but resolve. You didn't give up in that car. You didn't stop fighting, even when they tried to burn it all down. His voice dropped to a whisper. Neither will I. He knelt beside Blitz, laying a hand against the shepherd's ribs. The fur beneath his palm was warm, steady. No more trembling, no more panic. Blitz closed his eyes. You're not just a survivor, Caleb said. You're proof, and I won't let them take that from you. Outside, the wind began to howl, pressing harder against the window. The snow thickened in the glow of the streetlight, falling like ash over a sleeping town. And in a small room above a gas station motel, a man and a dog sat together not as rescuer and rescued, but as two beings with burn scars no one else could see. Two quiet sentinels, brought together by flame, bound now by something stronger. Blitz shifted, curling tighter. Caleb didn't sleep for a long time, but he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. The sign at the mouth of the trail was splintered and half swallowed by frost. Black Ridge Conservation Area. Closed until further notice, by order of Ashgrove County. Beneath it, the chain-link gate sagged where one hinge had rusted clean through. Someone had tried to weld it shut years ago, but time and weather had done more to break it open than any bolt cutter could. Blitz nosed the broken section, stepped through. Caleb followed. The air changed as soon as they crossed the threshold. Quieter, heavier. Even the snow underfoot felt different, less like it had fallen and more like it had settled. The branches overhead leaned low, burdened by time and unspoken things. He hadn't been here in a decade. Not since 2012. Not since everything about Black Ridge had turned into a sealed file and a list of regrets no one wanted to reopen. Caleb kept one hand near his sidearm, the other loose at his coat. Blitz moved several yards ahead, but always within view, pausing now and then to sniff a specific root or stretch of bark, ears pivoting to sounds Caleb couldn't detect. It wasn't just memory that haunted this place. It was knowing. This where you're taking me? Caleb murmured. Back to the beginning? Blitz didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The trail narrowed, becoming a series of animal paths, half lost in brush. At one bend, a fallen sign lay buried in snow, its edge charred black. Caleb didn't need to read it to remember what it used to say. Operation Echo Drop, Staging Zone. It was supposed to be a sting, a decisive one. Human trafficking ring, using Black Ridge as a back channel, smuggling teens through old logging paths, moving them under radar between counties, always slipping through checkpoints. Caleb had helped plan the sting, but the tip had been too late, or leaked, or both. By the time the team moved in, the traffickers were gone. What remained was a campsite burned down to wet ash, and two officers shot dead, both rookies, both barely into their second year. Their bodies had been positioned under a tarp like someone meant to shame the force. The official story said, intel failure. Caleb had called it something else under his breath. A warning. He hadn't walked this trail since. Blitz stopped suddenly ahead, his whole body going still. Then he turned his head not toward Caleb, but toward a slight break in the tree line on the left. A gap you wouldn't see unless you'd been here before. Unless you remembered the game trails that connected the outer paths like veins. Caleb moved to his side. There? Blitz didn't bark. He simply started walking. The break in the trees revealed a slope, steep but navigable, leading down toward a dry creek bed, choked with bramble and half-frozen moss. Blitz led him along it for nearly 20 minutes, always with that same focused silence. And then he stopped again. A clearing opened, just beyond an old root-snapped cedar. Dead leaves scattered across hard-packed soil. At its center, a metal ring of firestones, long, cold, and behind it a storage shed, almost invisible beneath creeping ivy and the sag of a collapsed tree limb. Caleb froze. He remembered that shed. They'd cataloged it, searched it, found nothing. But back then, there had been no Blitz. And no Lana Pierce. The shepherd stepped toward the shed and stopped just before the door. His tail stiffened. His ears rotated backward. He was listening. Caleb reached for his flashlight, swept the beam slowly across the shed's front. The lock had been replaced newer, not a department lock. That alone made his pulse shift. He tried the door. It didn't budge. "Guess they came back," Caleb muttered. He looked to Blitz and found the dog already digging, just to the side of the door, under a patch of leaves. Blitz's paws worked with a purpose. Not frantic. Intentional. Like he wasn't guessing he knew. Caleb dropped to one knee beside him and helped. After a few minutes, the dirt gave way to something solid. A box. Weatherproof. Olive green. Military issue. Caleb brushed it off, cracked it open. Inside, a USB drive wrapped in cloth. A badge warped by heat but still readable. Pierce. L. Det. His breath caught. Blitz sat down beside him, unmoving. "You were here with her," Caleb said softly. He looked at the badge again, his thumb brushing over the melted edge. Then the USB. It had been hidden for someone to find. Not the police, not officially. For him. Or for whoever Blitz would trust. A crow cawed sharply in the distance. Caleb stood, the drive clenched in one hand. Black Ridge hadn't just been a failed sting. It had been the first strike. A controlled fire, meant to burn away the truth. But someone had survived it. And Blitz was walking him straight back into the flames. Snow muffled everything. Even the wind seemed to hush as they stood there, Caleb with Lana's melted badge still in his coat pocket. Blitz standing sentinel beside the shed like a soldier called home too late. But Blitz didn't linger. He turned again, head low, breath visible in steady clouds, and padded toward a trail that branched off behind the roots of the cedar tree. There was no path. Not really. Just the ghost of one, a gap in the brush. Branches parted just enough to suggest something had passed through here. More than once. Caleb followed. No words. The slope steepened, forcing him to brace his boots against ice-glossed soil. A ravine opened below, shallow and curved like the ribs of some buried thing. At the far end, half-eaten by thicket and snow, sat what had once been a cabin. It leaned like it had tried to stand its ground, and lost one corner collapsed, roof sunken where a tree had driven through it. Ivy clawed up the sides. The glass in the windows was long gone. Blitz didn't wait for a command. He pushed forward, nose twitching, paws navigating the debris like a dog who'd done this before. Caleb hesitated at the threshold. The door hung sideways, only one hinge left. His gloved fingers brushed it aside, and he stepped in. The air was colder inside, not just from the draft. Something about the place hadn't let go of what happened here. His flashlight sliced through the dark, illuminating ruin. The front room was gutted. Chunks of ceiling had caved in. Snow had drifted in thick curls across the floor. But what caught his breath wasn't the decay. It was the marks. Scratches. Deep, parallel gouges along the wooden wall. Not random, not weather, not time. Claw marks. And near them, blackened restraints bolted into one of the beams. One had snapped clean through, like something had pulled until it tore. The metal smelled of rust. And something else. Blood. Caleb knelt, touched the edge of one of the claw marks. Dried, flaked blood still clung to the splintered grain. The flashlight shook in his other hand. Blitz gave a low whine. The shepherd had crossed into the next room, what looked like a half-fallen sleeping area. Caleb followed. Boots crunching over glass and snow. There, in the far corner, Blitz had stopped. His head was bowed, nose buried in something barely visible beneath a collapsed mattress and old tarp. Caleb moved in, heart thudding. He knelt. It was fabric. Frayed. Faded. A scarf. And not just any scarf, he recognized the pattern. A blue and gray checkered wool blend. Caleb had seen it in old precinct photos. Wrapped around Lana's neck in a winter interview. She wore it like armor, said it had belonged to her older brother before he died in the line of duty. She never went anywhere without it. Caleb reached out, lifted it slowly. The fabric was stiff with cold, but it hadn't frozen through. He brought it close to his face. Faint, but still there. Her scent. Not strong. Not recent. But not gone. Behind him, Blitz let out a sound Caleb hadn't heard before, half growl, half whimper, his eyes fixed on a point near the rafters. Caleb turned the flashlight upward. Words, scratched into the wall, high and rough, like someone standing and restrained, had carved them with something sharp. Still here. His throat closed. He stepped back. Saturday hard on a beam, scarf still in hand, the light shaking just enough to make the shadows shift like breath. She was here, he whispered. Blitz lowered himself beside him, slowly, as if the weight of it all had finally sunk through the bones. Caleb looked at him. She fought. Blitz said nothing, but his gaze didn't move from the claw marks on the far wall. Caleb reached out, rested a hand gently on the dog's head. She fought to stay alive. His fingers tightened around the scarf. A tremor ran through his chest, not from cold, but from something older, something that had waited too long to rise. She might still be, he whispered. Blitz closed his eyes. And for a long moment, neither of them moved two survivors sitting in the ruins of a place that was never meant to be found. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a branch cracked. But Caleb didn't flinch. He folded the scarf carefully and tucked it inside his coat. They weren't done. Not yet. Snow sifted through the rafters as Caleb eased back into the clearing, Lana's scarf warm against his chest. Blitz padded ahead, nose flicking left and right, drawing invisible lines through the air. The sky had turned the color of lead. Dusk would fall early beneath these trees. Caleb's boots crunched over a drift that hit a tangle of roots. Every surface seemed to whisper, "You're not alone." They retraced the narrow creek bed, but Blitz paused where the ravine shallowed, ears canted forward, body rigid. Caleb scanned the undergrowth, only the hush of pine needles and the distant creak of an iced-over branch. "Easy, boy," he murmured, stepping past. A snap. The ground vanished. A cable hissed through the air, cinching his right ankle and yanking him skyward. Caleb's breath punched out as he flipped, shoulders slamming into cold emptiness. The forest spun. Snow exploded from branches overhead. He dangled 5 feet off the ground, blood thundering in his ears. The snare-line fresh steel wire bit into his boot heel, creaking with his weight. Blitz barked, a sound ripped from somewhere primal. He circled beneath, hackles high, teeth flashing at shadows Caleb couldn't see. "It's okay," Caleb gasped, forcing calm he didn't feel. "Knife! Find the knife!" The blade had skittered into the brush when he'd been jerked upward. Blitz sprang toward the undergrowth, snout low, paws digging until metal glinted in the gray light. He seized the knife by its handle, trotted back, and rose on hind legs, bracing his forepaws against Caleb's swinging torso. The dog's weight steadied the arc just enough. "Good boy, hold." Caleb clutched the handle, thumbed the blade open with numb fingers, and reached upward. Every pull sent a jolt through his hip. He sawed at the wire, breath frosting the steel. A twig cracked deeper in the trees. Caleb's pulse spiked. Someone was there watching the trap work. The wire strands frayed, then snapped. He dropped hard, knees buckling in snow, knife still clutched tight. Blitz pressed against him, a living brace. "Footsteps!" Caleb hissed. Blitz pivoted toward the sound with a guttural snarl. Caleb forced his weight onto the leg, sprained but usable, then flicked off the flashlight to kill the beam. The forest dimmed into slate and shadow. Between two pines, a silhouette shifted, tall, coat flapping, the dull gleam of a rifle barrel catching the dying light. Caleb steadied his breath, letting the hush swallow their location. Snowflakes drifted, soft as ash. The figure remained motionless, as if determining whether the snare had claimed its prey. Blitz's growl rolled low in his chest. Caleb laid a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Wait." A gust rattled branches. The shape dissolved into the gray. Gone, or merely blended deeper. Caleb listened, heartbeats, wind, a distant raven's croak, no bootsteps, no breathing but his own. He sheathed the knife, then crouched to inspect the wire. Fresh, industrial strength, anchored to a young birch with a knot any tactical unit would admire. Not the work of weekend poachers, this was deliberate. Placed on a path only someone who'd walked these crimes would predict. "They knew we'd come," he muttered. Or followed. He searched the snow around the anchor point. 2 footprints deep, wide tread, likely military-issue boots. Brand new. A cigarette butt half buried nearby, filter pinched flat. Blitz sniffed it, sneezed at the stench, then stared uphill, muscles tight as drawn wire. His entire body pointed toward the dark. Caleb's ankle throbbed, but urgency smothered pain. "We move," he whispered. "Quiet." They cut cross-slope, staying beneath the broken canopy where shadows pooled. Every 40 feet, Blitz halted, nose testing the air, then signaled clear with a flick of his ears. Still, Caleb felt eyes trailing them like a heat he couldn't see but knew burned somewhere close. When they reached the upper ridge road, Caleb spared one glance back. Snow had begun again, gentle, unassuming already, filling his footprints, already hiding the snare cable, already burying the proof of a watcher who preferred silhouettes to confrontation. But he sensed the message left behind. "We see you. Turn back." Caleb's jaw clenched. The first fire had taken his sister. The second had nearly taken Blitz and whatever truth Lana carried. He would not let a third blaze finish what the others began. He rested a hand on Blitz's neck. The dog pressed closer, steady as bedrock in the falling dusk. "Whoever set that trap," Caleb said, voice low, "thinks fear will send us home. I'm sick." Blitz's only reply was a quiet huff, as if to say, "Then they don't know us at all." Together, they limped into the deepening dark, hunter and hound, bound by scars, carrying a scarf that still smelled of hope and a resolve no steel wire could tether. Steam curled from May Whitmore's chipped mug as she set it beside the unfolded county map. The clinic's reception lights were dimmed for the night, casting long amber stripes across the vinyl floor. Outside, dawn hovered somewhere beyond the frost-fogged windows. But inside, the air felt caught between yesterday's terror and whatever waited next. Caleb stood at the counter, ankle wrapped tight, the scent of antiseptic still clinging to his jeans. Blitz sat nearby, bandaged paws planted firmly, tail motionless except for the tip, which flicked each time Caleb exhaled. The map consumed the desk. Ash groves, winding highways, forest reserves, and forgotten industrial lots printed in washed-out blues and greens. May had pinned it open with a jar of cotton swabs and a stainless steel suture kit. Blitz lowered his nose and began to work the paper like it was a trail itself. He traced the inked rivers, snuffled the faded folds. Every so often he paused, ears perked, as if listening to memories trapped in cartography. Caleb and May exchanged silent glances, neither daring to interrupt. "Look at him," May whispered, leaning closer. "He's tracking time." Caleb nodded. "And ghosts." Blitz stopped on the northern quadrant, where a snarl of rail spur lines cut into a gray rectangle labeled Dunlow Paper Mill, decommissioned. He pawed the spot once, then again, claws scraping softly against the laminate sheen. May's expression tightened. "That place burned twice, once in 2098, again during the 2012 Sting fallout." County condemned it, and every disappearance file Lana pulled circled that mill, Caleb said. He pulled the melted badge from his pocket, set it beside the map. She hid her proof along that same ridge. Blitz just confirmed the next waypoint. The shepherd whined, nostrils flaring at the badge, then returned to paw the mill's grid square, a dog's insistence, undeniable. Caleb traced the route with his fingertip, whisper thinking aloud. Access roads washed out. Only way in is through the old rail turntable or the storm runoff tunnels. May lifted her mug, sipped, then asked the question that had hung unspoken since Blackridge. What if she's still inside, injured, drugged the way those restraints were cut? Caleb remembered the claw marks, the dried blood, the message scratched into rotten boards. Still here. A chill rippled beneath his skin, but resolve burned hotter. "We go tonight before they clear evidence," he answered. May set her mug down with quiet force. "You'll need antibiotics for Blitz. Burn cream, gauze, maybe a mild sedative in case the smoke's bad." "We'll take it." Caleb folded the map, but Blitz snarled softly in impatient rumble. The shepherd nosed the edge, insisting they keep the place marked. Caleb unfolded it halfway and tore out the corner containing the mill grid. He tucked the scrap into his jacket, leaving the rest behind. Blitz wagged, once, satisfied. May moved to a cabinet, pulling supplies with the precision of someone building a field kit in her sleep. "You'll also need peroxide for that ankle." "It'll hold," She paused, eyes meeting his. Caleb, traps don't reset themselves. Someone was there watching. I know. He slung his coat over one shoulder. That someone just lost the element of surprise. Before May could protest, Blitz nudged her thigh gentle, an apology for the havoc he'd brought to her quiet practice. May knelt, knuckles brushing the shepherd's jaw. Bring her back, she whispered. Blitz leaned into the touch, then trotted to Caleb's side, ready. May handed Caleb a small tackle box of medical essentials. You haul him out one more time, and you both come here first, got it? Caleb managed a tired smile. Yes, ma'am. At the door he hesitated, turning back toward the pool of light where the map had lain. Thanks. He said a word heavy, with everything unspoken between them. May just nodded, arms folded, pretending the hollowness in her chest was only fatigue. Caleb clicked the leash clip onto Blitz's harness, though both knew it was ceremonial at best. The shepherd pressed against the door, muscles coiled. Map of ghosts, Caleb murmured. Let's see what they buried under all that ash. They stepped into the pre-dawn chill, breath plumed white, somewhere a crow cawed, once sharp, solitary. Caleb's SUV waited at the curb, engine ticking as it idled. He opened the rear hatch. Blitz leapt in without command and turned to face the world head. On through the windshield. Caleb slid behind the wheel, the scrap of map on the dash, Lana's badge beside it like a compass pointing through smoke. He caught Blitz's reflection in the mirror, eyes bright, alive with purpose, and felt, for the first time since the cabin, a spark of something larger than fear. Hope, maybe, or the certainty that even places burned to ruin could still hold truth in their charred bones if a dog stubborn enough kept pointing the way. He put the SUV in gear. Tires crunched over winter grit. The sky ahead bruised into violet, promising another cold dawn. Behind them, May stood framed in the clinic doorway until the taillights vanished. Inside, the map still fluttered on the counter from the draft, a tapestry of old roads and older sins waiting for news of whether two battered souls could outrun the ghosts etched into its faded ink. Dunlow paper mill rose from the valley floor like a rusted leviathan, its skeletal smokestacks clawing at a pale sky. Fire had gutted the main roof years ago. Now winter finished the job. Snow drifted through jagged holes, settling on conveyor belts that would never move again. Wind keened through shattered window panes, carrying the faint tang of wet ash and something metallic beneath. Caleb killed the SUV's headlights 200 yards out and rolled to a stop behind a wall of toppled pallets. The silence that followed felt absolute, as if the world were holding its breath. He slipped out, ankles still throbbing beneath the brace May had insisted he wear, and opened the hatch for Blitz. The shepherd leapt down, nose instantly to the ground. Even bandaged, his paws found quiet purchase on the frost-hard dirt. Caleb secured the medkit to his pack, double-checked the mag in his sidearm, then knelt. Same rules, he whispered, rubbing the space between Blitz's ears. You lead. I watch 6. Blitz gave a short huff acknowledgement rather than approval, then trotted toward a side entrance warped by heat. Caleb followed, scanning the tree line. No movement, but last night's watcher hovered in his thoughts like a phantom itch. They ducked through a twisted service door. Inside, everything smelled of mold and chemical ghosts. Wet footprints of melted snow outlined their path across the buckled factory floor. Rusted tracks crisscrossed overhead where hoists once carried endless rolls of pulp. Now only a brittle hush hung there, punctuated by occasional droplets falling from beams into unseen puddles below. Blitz halted near a pile of collapsed ductwork, nose working overtime. Caleb swept the flashlight beam, catching crimson flecks against the dull silver of old steel. Blood dried but not ancient, speckled the metal like rust that had spread too quickly. Fresh enough to matter, he muttered. The dog's head snapped left, toward a narrow maintenance corridor. Caleb's pulse tripped as Blitz surged down the passageway, every muscle taut. He followed, boots crunching gritty debris. Halfway down, concrete walls narrowed and sloped downward, leading to a sub-basement door hanging off one hinge. Blitz stopped just inside and let out a low growl. Caleb stepped past him, sweeping the light. Graffiti snaked across water-stained walls. A single overhead bulb, long dead, dangled by its wires like a severed nerve. Near the center of the room, blood again, pooled and dragged, as if something or someone had been hauled across the floor. Caleb's stomach knotted. He knelt, Touching the edge, it flaked, but still held dark color. 2, maybe 3 days old. Opposite the stain lay a battered metal locker. Its door, half ripped off, hung like a lazy jaw. Blitz pushed his muzzle inside, pawing gently. A brittle snap of paper echoed. Caleb reached in and drew out a folded photograph, edges streaked with reddish fingerprints. He turned it toward the flashlight. Lana, her auburn hair matted with sweat, face bruised, lip split. She sat cuffed to a steel chair in a concrete room, perhaps this one, perhaps another echo of it, eyes trained on something beyond the lens. Defiance burned there, but so did fatigue. Across the bottom border, in sloppy red Sharpie, someone had scrawled a single warning: no loose ends. Caleb's vision tunneled. He felt the room tilt, heat rising in his throat despite the cold. The words pulsed like embers, as if the marker were still wet, still bleeding anger. Blitz whined and nudged his knee, grounding him. Caleb exhaled slowly, folding the photo with surgical care before sliding it into an evidence pouch. Not a ransom photo, he said aloud, voice rough. Proof of possession, or a trophy. He rose, scanning the corners. Pipes overhead dripped a slow rhythm. A single set of fresh boot prints led away from the blood trail toward a half-collapsed stairwell. The only obvious exit. Someone moved her, Caleb murmured, tracing the prints with light. But why leave the picture? Blitz's ears flicked back danger. Caleb pivoted. From deeper in the stairwell, a dull clang rang out, metal hitting concrete. He killed the flashlight instinctively. Darkness swallowed them. He crouched behind a stack of pulp bales, hand resting on Blitz's shoulders. The dog's breathing shifted, preparing. Footsteps approached, unhurried, confident. A flashlight clicked on, its beam lancing the gloom. Caleb held his breath, heart hammering against ribs. The beam swept past their hiding place, lingered on the blood smear, then on the locker now empty. A voice, low and sardonic. Told you he'd come sniffing. Another voice, further back, laughed short, humorless. Caleb's skin crawled. 2 of them, maybe more. Blitz's muscles coiled. Caleb slipped the safety off his pistol, thoughts racing. He could engage 2 against 1, maybe, but Blitz was still healing, and if a firefight erupted, they might never find Lana alive. He tapped the shepherd's collar twice, then eased a step back, deeper into shadow. Metal groaned overhead, masking the soft retreat. The voices drifted closer. One kicked something likely the locker door, cursing when it clanged. Caleb and Blitz slid behind a sagging conveyor belt, moving inch by inch until a gap in the wall appeared a breach from fire damage, barely shoulder wide. He motioned Blitz through first. The shepherd squeezed, tail disappearing into darkness. Caleb followed, scraping his coat against blackened rebar. On the other side, they found themselves in a narrow service conduit that paralleled the main hall. Cool air rushed past, dragging the scent of pine from outside. Caleb allowed himself one breath of relief. Voices echoed faintly now, frustrated. Blitz nudged forward, head low, leading them along the conduit until an exit hatch opened onto the rear loading yard. They emerged into dawn's first bruised light. A smoky haze settled over the rail tracks, and frost glittered on rusted boxcars lined like tombs. Caleb crouched beside Blitz, catching his eye. "They're cleaning up," he whispered. "No loose ends means tonight, maybe hours." Blitz responded with a decisive bark, quiet but urgent, then loped toward a particular boxcar. Its sliding door was ajar, just enough to show a padlock hanging unused. Caleb followed, prying it wider. Inside, dust motes whirled like neglected memories. Shelves of confiscated police radios, partial uniforms, and file boxes filled the Space Stash Depot, mobile and disposable. In the center, a crate marked "Property Hold." Me lay open, half emptied. Caleb's gut twisted. Mobile evidence cleanup. They'd burn this too when they were done. He turned to Blitz. "We take what we can, then we cut them off before they disappear again." The shepherd wagged once, a ghost of triumph. Caleb felt the ember of a vow ignite bright against the mill's ruins. No loose ends? Then he would be the frayed thread they could never sever. The boxcar smelled of old ink and cold steel, a library of crimes packed into corrugated walls. Caleb's flashlight skimmed rows of plastic totes, their lids pry-marked and hurriedly snapped back in place. Blitz paced a tight circle, nails clicking on the warped floorboards. each breath puffing white in the dawn-lit gloom. Somewhere below the railyard a distant coupling clanged. The sound reverberated through metal like a warning bell. Caleb knelt beside the crate marked "Property Hold Me." The lid rested askew, revealing a tangle of evidence bags. He peeled one free, a police badge, Ash Grove PD, its number filed smooth. Another bag held a shoulder patch. Threads snipped so close the backing showed white. He swallowed hard. "They're stripping real uniforms," he whispered. "Building ghosts that can walk past any checkpoint." Blitz lowered his head into the crate, teeth gently lifting a slim binder wrapped in butcher paper. Caleb took it, heart thudding. He unfolded the paper to expose a ledger navy cloth cover, edges smoke-stained. No title, only a small sticker. SRU Logistics. He opened it. Rows of typed tables filled the pages. Dates, times, highway junctions. Names in one column, each paired with an alphanumeric code. Many he recognized from missing persons, circulars, teens, single mothers, runaways whose photos had wilted on bulletin boards. The last column read, "Resolved," every entry stamped with a red check. His stomach lurched. Resolved meant delivered. Halfway through, a new sheet was paper-clipped in. Laser-printed, fresh. Emergency Relocation Manifest Crestview. Surrounds. Oversight. Dep. Chief M. Leary. Caleb's vision tunneled. Marcus Lyrie, the department's iron star, champagne glass smile at press conferences, decades of community trust banners hung under his watch. Lyrie had pinned Caleb's commendation for a hostage rescue 3 years back, patted his shoulder, and whispered, "Men like you, keep the rot out." And here was his signature, inked, neat, and sure, authorizing timed shipments of human cargo. Beside him, Blitz whined, sensing the shift in Caleb's heartbeat. Caleb flipped another page. A photo slid free and tumbled to the floor. Blitz nudged it upright with his nose. Caleb froze. It was Lana again, but earlier. She stood in precinct blues beside Lyrie. Handshake captured mid-grip. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. A small pin note on the back. Presentation of SRU audit findings 0 2 weeks prior to disappearance. She'd confronted him. And 2 weeks later she'd vanished. The ledger weighed heavier, as though absorbing the grief in the air. Caleb pressed his palm to the page, forcing himself to breathe. It goes all the way up. The words tasted like rust. He thought of the snare in the woods, the watchers in the mill, the scorch on Blitz's flank. They were cogs in a machine humming under the town's polite facade, powered by Lyrie's reach. A growl rumbled low in Blitz's chest. Caleb followed the shepherd's gaze to a canvas duffel slumped in the corner. He unzipped it. Stacks of fake ID cards, slid-out driver's licenses, city contractor badges, even state investigator creds, all bearing random names but familiar faces. He recognized one, a rookie who'd transferred last month. His real badge had been in the crate, stripped and defaced. Uniform mannequins, Caleb thought. Move the victims, wear a borrowed shield, disappear. He gathered the ledger, photo, and a handful of IDs into his pack, stuffing gauze rolls between them to muffle any rattle. Footsteps echoed outside, boots crunching cinders along the track. Blitz's ears snapped toward the sound. He dropped into a silent crouch. Caleb killed the flashlight. Through a rust seam, he saw 2 silhouettes crossing the yard. Rifles slung casual, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. They laughed at some unheard joke, too relaxed, for men guarding a death ledger, unaware anything was missing yet. He waited until their voices faded, then breathed again. "We need out," he mouthed to Blitz. The dog responded with a tiny wag ready. They slipped through the door slit and hugged the shadow of the boxcar. Caleb's ankle protested each step, but adrenaline drowned the pain. Dawn painted the sky ash rose, outlining smokestacks like gravestones. Behind them, the crate of stripped identities waited to burn. He had no doubt that was tonight's plan. A freight horn blared far down the line, masking their retreat to the SUV. Inside, Caleb locked the doors, heart still hammering. Blitz leapt to the passenger seat, placing one paw on the dash as if to steady the horizon. Caleb laid the ledger across the steering wheel, thumb brushing Lyrie's crisp signature again. "You saved this," he said softly. "Saved her proof." Blitz looked at him, eyes fierce but grieving. the way a soldier's might after dragging a friend from fire. Caleb started the engine. First Blackridge, now Dunlow. If Lyrie's sweeping up loose ends, he'll strike tonight. He glanced at the dog. But we'll be there first. Blitz gave a quiet rumble agreement, not threat. The SUV rolled forward, tires crunching over gravel. In the rear view, Dunlow shrank until it was nothing but smoke stains against morning light. But the rot inside those walls was on record now, names, dates, an ink trail leading straight to the department's highest office. Caleb tightened his grip on the wheel. The fire that took Josie had taught him what unfinished sorrow felt like, how it burned in the ribs forever. He wouldn't let another flame go unanswered. Lyrie had built his empire on ashes. Caleb intended to scatter them to the wind. Blitz settled beside him, head on his knee, as if pledging the same. In the glove box, Lana's folded photo rested like a compass pointing through ruin. Ashgrove was waking up to a cold sunrise. By nightfall, its shadows would know his name, and the dog who wouldn't let go of the scent of truth. The clinic's porch light glowed like a lone ember in the dusk. Caleb parked next to May Whitmore's battered Subaru. Blitz leapt out first, steadier than that morning, though his bandages were stained with grit and blood. Caleb tucked two things into his pocket: a freshly printed page from a stolen ledger and a warped microchip tag peeled from the collar plate of a melted tactical vest. Burned edges, but the circuitry inside still pulsed with unspoken weight. Inside, eucalyptus-scented warmth met him. May, in a maroon sweatshirt, glanced up from the counter relief, fading to concern at the sight of his limp. "I told you that ankle." Later, he cut her off. "I've got something." Blitz headed straight for the exam room. May followed, closing the door behind them. Caleb placed the tag on a steel dish. "Came off a vest in Dunlow's train car. Might be Lana's backup plan." May scanned it with her handheld reader. The LED blinked amber, then green. A chime. "Still alive," she murmured. "Encrypted audio." A burst of static. Then Lana's voice, thin, frayed, exhausted. "If you found this, the vest's burned. They're dosing us, midazolam and ketamine. Every 6 hours. Memory slipping. I repeat names: Blitz, Caleb Rowan, May Whitmore, but I'm losing them. They're moving the inventory tonight. I heard Foundry. If the Hawk signs off, there'll be no one left to testify." The message ended in a breathless hush. May stared at the screen. "They're drugging her to wipe memory. That combo won't kill her, but it'll erase who she is." Caleb's jaw tightened. The ledger page in his jacket burned like a brand. Crestview, Convoys, Lyrie's signature at the bottom. "He's authorizing the transfers." May whispered, stunned. "They'll torch every witness," Caleb said, "including Lana." May looked at Blitz, ears flicking, watching them like he understood. "He already saved you twice. How many times can we ask him to do this? He's not breaking. Not while she's alive." Blitz's tail thumped. May pulled a vial from a drawer. "Nalmefene, counteracts sedatives. I've got stimulants for Blitz too." Caleb took the supplies. "You're part of this now, May. If they tie you to us, they already will. I've been saving animals no one else wants. Tonight, I save one more." Caleb gripped her hand. "We bring her back. And we bring Lyrie down," she said, eyes fierce. Thunder rolled. Blitz raised his nose to the vents, sensing what was coming. May buckled a harness over his shoulders. "If he slows, inject here," she said, pointing to the port. "It'll sting, but it'll give him 30 more minutes. I'll make them count." As they stepped outside, snowflakes swirled under the porch light. May touched Caleb's arm. "Bring her home," she whispered. "I will. And Caleb, end this fire." He gave a grim nod. "With pleasure." The SUV rolled into darkness. May stood until the taillights vanished, then turned inside. Behind her, only the porch lantern stayed, lit one flicker of defiance against the storm. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Blitz lay curled near the heater, half asleep but listening. Caleb stood silent by the counter while May uploaded Lana's chip data. Lana's voice again, warped by static. "They've started using something new. Memory dampeners. Like chalk wiped from a board. I may forget who I am soon. If you find this, I'm being moved. I think they know I've been hiding messages." Silence. May sank into the chair. She could forget her badge, her name, even Blitz. Caleb said nothing, staring at the monitor, fists clenched. "You have to report this," May said. To who? He replied. Lyrie's signature is on that manifest. But you don't know who else is involved. You're not a cop anymore. And I still have Lana, he said. May fell silent. He moved to Lana's vest. Still scorched, collar fused into the Kevlar. Smoke, fear, urgency. They didn't kill Blitz, didn't erase his bark, he remembered. He led us here. May looked at the dog. He follows you. Caleb nodded, resigned. No warrants, no backup, just us. May swallowed. That's not a plan. That's suicide. They didn't plan for Blitz to survive. That was their mistake. Outside, the wind picked up. Blitz stood and padded to Caleb's side. May rubbed her temple. If you're really going off-grid, you need more than instincts. Help or lecture? Both, she said, then softened. I'll monitor the chip. If there's more data. He nodded. Thank you. She stepped closer. If you don't come back, promise me, you won't let him go alone. He won't. Blitz's tail stirred. Caleb ran a hand down the shepherd's scarred back. We'll go wherever you lead. At the name Lana, Blitz's eyes, sharpened memory snapping into place. You loved her too, didn't you? May whispered to the dog. Blitz licked Caleb's wrist and went to the door. Wherever this ends, Caleb said. We end it together. May opened the rear entrance. Just before stepping out, Caleb turned. Thanks for not asking me to stay. I knew you wouldn't. The door shut behind them. Blitz stepped into the dark. Caleb followed two halves of the same vow. Rain fell like memory, soft but unrelenting. Ash Grove streets shimmered under weak street lamps. The town, for now, pretended nothing was burning beneath its surface. But the reckoning had begun. Inside the clinic's back room, Blitz paced. Caleb sat by the window, wrapping cloth tape around an old service pistol. A folder lay open maps, photos, names. All roads led to Lana. Storm's picking up, May said, organizing vials. Her hands were practiced, but her eyes betrayed fear. We'll need the cover, Caleb replied. The north road's blocked. Blitz found a trail under the Ridgewater tracks. May zipped the bag. What do you expect to find? Answers. A gust hit the windows. Blitz froze, ears flicking toward the hallway. May watched. He knows this ends tonight. So do I. They moved with precision. Caleb, dressed in dark layers, secured his files in waterproof plastic, every motion deliberate. May handed him a satchel. Antiseptic, adrenaline, not much, but maybe enough. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, regret, resilience. Something left unsaid. Thank you, he whispered. She squeezed his hand. Bring him back. Both of them. Outside, rain thickened into a curtain. A distant siren wailed, irrelevant. The real battle loomed elsewhere. Blitz stood at the door, wearing his old harness. Caleb crouched beside him, buckled the straps. Blitz, he said. Lead. The shepherd didn't bark, just pressed into the door, ready. May paused by the light switch. This town's about to remember what it means to bleed. Caleb smiled faintly. Then it's time they remembered who bled first. They stepped into the rain. Ash Grove slept, unaware, curtains drawn, truth ignored. They didn't see the man in the shadows, the dog at his side, the echo of a woman's voice embedded in a charred chip. But the countdown had begun. Every raindrop, a ticking second. Every breath, a step toward reckoning. Blitz moved like a compass finally realigned. Caleb followed, eyes forward. No plan, no promises, just memory and the fire waiting to be answered. The rain had softened to mist when Caleb Rowan reached the skeletal remains of Vaughn Industries. Once a government contractor, now just rust and ruin. But something still moved beneath its skin. Blitz, his loyal German shepherd, led the way nose to the earth, pulled by instinct, sharpened by trauma. They slipped through a tier in the old chain-linked fence. Inside, scorch marks and smoke told a story someone wanted buried. The facility had been torched, welded shut from the inside. Caleb pushed through a side door. The scent hit him first burnt plastic, chemicals, and something underneath, something wrong. The silence was eerie. No animals, no wind, just absence. Down a hallway too clean to be abandoned, Blitz led him to a wide room. Shackles fused to a scorched table, training logs half melted in a smoldering bin. One fragment read, Subject B, 17 trauma, resistant. Handler terminated, awaiting reassignment. Blitz growled low. His paws scratched near a vent torn open from within. Caleb peeked inside. Blood, scorch marks, a handprint. Someone had tried to escape. Then came the click above the door. A pressure switch. Blitz sparked. Caleb grabbed his harness and dove. Fire erupted behind them. He shoved Blitz into the vent and crawled after, smoke licking at his heels. They escaped barely. But Blitz wasn't done. He limped back into the inferno. Caleb followed, coughing through flames and falling steel. In a loading bay, a bark cut through the smoke, faint but urgent. Blitz was trapped in a shipping container. Caleb smashed the lock with a crowbar. Inside, Blitz lay curled, burned but alive. His eyes locked on Caleb like a lifeline. "I got you," Caleb whispered, wrapping Blitz in a thermal blanket. He carried him through collapsing beams and sparks, shielding his body until they crashed behind the last generator housing, alive barely. But Blitz stirred. His paw tapped a rhythm on the gravel. Tap, tap, pause, tap. He limped toward a pile of twisted scaffolding and pawed at the ground. Beneath scorched debris, Caleb found it. A hidden hatch, sealed from the inside. Then a knock. Faint, human. Someone was alive down there. Blitz stood tall beside him, burned but unshaken. They descended. The ladder dropped into a concrete corridor humming with electricity and memories. Fluorescent lights flickered. The air smelled of bleach and old blood. Blitz led the way, nose low, tail stiff. They passed carts lined with syringes and vials marked Midazolam, SCP Lot 3R, for behavioral reset only. At a fork, they turned right. The left was buried in rubble. Blood smeared the floor ahead, fresh enough to matter. A door stood half open. Blitz stopped. Caleb crouched beside him. "You know this place," he whispered. Blitz didn't move. Inside, the air turned cold. Filing cabinets overturned. 2 welded cages. The scent of decay clung to the steel. And beyond the flickering lights, silence. But not for long, because someone was still here, waiting, and the war wasn't over. In the center of the room, chained to a pipe, was a small cot. Beside it, an oxygen mask, a cracked IV stand. Empty zip ties curled on the floor like dead snakes. And on the wall, a single photo, pinned like a threat. It was Lana Pierce, handcuffed, eyes bruised, but alive. She looked directly at the camera. And behind her, barely visible in the blurred background, stood a figure in black. Not masked, not hidden, just watching. Blitz stepped forward slowly. His nose lifted toward the photograph, then toward the far corner of the room. There, half hidden under a cabinet, was her scarf. He pawed at it gently, then lay down beside it, resting his head. A quiet, aching sound escaped his throat. Caleb knelt, picked up the scarf. Blood had dried into the fibers, but the scent must still be there. That's what Blitz had followed. All this way, through smoke, through pain, through fire. "She's been here," Caleb murmured. He turned, examined the wall near the holding pen. Numbers were scratched there, deep, erratic marks from something sharp. Dates. 2/18, 2/22, 2/27. And next to them, moved. 3rd floor, arm 41. He stepped back, realization chilling his skin. "They relocated her," he said aloud, "and they didn't expect anyone to survive the transfer." From above came a groan, steel shifting. Then the lights flickered. "Someone's still here," Caleb muttered, standing slowly. Blitz was already on his feet, hackles raised. The corridor behind them was no longer empty. Footsteps, 2 sets, no voices. The trap was still open. Caleb drew his weapon and backed toward the far wall, lowering slightly behind an overturned stretcher. Blitz positioned himself just ahead, shielding without hesitation. They waited. The footsteps stopped. A silence settled too still. Then the intercom cracked to life with a burst of static. A voice, male, cold. "You shouldn't have come this far, Officer Rowan." It wasn't a recording. It was live. Caleb looked up at the intercom speaker, his voice steady. Neither should you. A low chuckle. She lasted longer than most. But Blitz was always the key. Blitz growled again. His body vibrated with memory and rage. The speaker clicked off. Then, hissing gas. Caleb cursed, yanked open the nearest vent, and pulled the fire suppressant valve from the wall. He jammed the canister into the vent, cutting off the chemical stream. But the message was clear. Time was up. He turned to Blitz, adrenaline kicking back in. "We're not done," he whispered. "We're just getting started." And somewhere in that flickering hallway, the truth was waiting with blood still wet on its hands. The hallway twisted like a serpent concrete, cold, painted with shadows. Caleb moved low, every muscle tight, heart beating a steady rhythm against his ribs. Blitz padded ahead, silent despite the limp, ears perked, body taut, with purpose. They reached the final door, room 41. A light glowed beneath the threshold, harsh, clinical. Blitz stopped, nose flaring. A low, deliberate growl rumbled from his chest. Caleb knelt beside him, placed a hand on the thick fur between his shoulders. "Wait for my mark," he whispered. "Then go. Fast and hard." He checked the magazine. Full. He twisted the knob gently. Unlocked. Then he counted quietly. 3, 2. He kicked the door open on 1. Everything exploded at once. Inside, 3 men turned toward him. One at the far end, near a gurney, syringe in hand. The others with sidearms drawn from shoulder holsters. Lana lay on the gurney, wrists bound to metal rails. IV still taped to her forearm. Her eyes fluttered half open. Sedated, but alive. The man closest to her moved first, jabbing the syringe downward toward her neck. But Blitz was already airborne, a blur of fury and instinct. He slammed into the man's ribs with the full weight of 80 pounds of trained precision. The syringe clattered across the floor. The man screamed as teeth sank into the soft web of muscle between his shoulder and throat. Blitz didn't let go. The other 2 fired not at Blitz, but at Caleb. Caleb rolled right, ducking behind a row of overturned medical carts. A round grazed his sleeve. Another ricocheted off metal. He returned, fire sharp, disciplined. 2 shots. One hit the shoulder of the man to the left. He staggered backward, crashing into a tray of scalpels. The other dove behind a metal cabinet. Blitz was still locked onto his target, shaking, pinning the man beneath him as blood bloomed across sterile tile. The second attacker stood again, raising his pistol. Caleb stood with him. 1 clean shot. The man dropped, weapon clattering from lifeless hands. The third, the one bleeding, raised both arms shakily. "I surrender," he panted. I'm just logistics. I didn't." Caleb's gun never wavered. "Where's the data? The rest of the files?" The man nodded frantically toward the far desk. "Tablet. Black case. Everything's in there. Transport logs. Doses. Client IDs." Caleb shot once, a clean, shallow shot to the thigh. The man screamed and collapsed. "I didn't shoot to kill," Caleb muttered. "You'll stand trial." He rushed to the gurney. Lana's skin was pale under the cold light, bruises peeking from beneath her collar, but her lips moved, faintly. "Blitz?" Caleb knelt close. "Yeah, he's here. He found you." Blitz had finally released the man beneath him, who was now unconscious and bleeding, breath shallow but alive. The dog limped to Lana's side and pressed his head against her arm, eyes full of something more than instinct, recognition, relief. She blinked slowly. A tear slid from the corner of her eye. "Course he did," she whispered, barely audible. Caleb worked fast, unstrapping her wrists, unhooking the IV, pocketing the remaining vial for analysis. The drug was labeled only with a number, SCP-47X. He turned to the tablet on the desk, flicking it open with a gloved hand. Dozens of folders lit the screen names, dates, coordinates, a map with pins all over the state. Another tab, trauma, responsive conditioning, canine and human subjects. A separate folder was marked Pierce, Lana. He tapped it. Images flashed, stills from the room, logs of sedation intervals, notes about resistance levels. One line stood out, memory degradation achieved. Subject remains combative. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We need to go," he said, scooping Lana into his arms. Blitz limped beside him, Every few steps, glancing back ears twitching. He was listening, and Caleb heard it too. Voices from the corridor. Multiple footsteps. Fast. Reinforcements. He grabbed Blitz's collar. New plan. Emergency exit? The bleeding man groaned and pointed weakly toward a red hatch beside the metal shelves. Back tunnel. Leads to the creek bed. Caleb nodded once. You live because of that. He kicked the latch open. Cold air burst in damp and metallic. The tunnel sloped downward, narrow and slick. He shifted Lana's weight, pulled Blitz close. They disappeared into the dark. Behind them, the door to room 4-1 swung wide. Shadows entered, guns raised, but it was too late. The reckoning had already begun. It was the sound of water that roused her first, the hush of a shallow creek winding over stones, soft as a lullaby. Then came the warmth, a blanket draped gently over her shoulders, the dry heat of a camp lantern casting a dim halo around her. But it was the smell that broke through the fog. Fur, ash, earth, and something she hadn't let herself hope for in weeks. Loyalty. Lana's eyes fluttered open slowly. The night sky arched above, cut by the bare silhouettes of pines. She was lying on the forest floor, her head resting on a rolled-up jacket. Her body was sore, muscles stiff with trauma, but she was alive. She blinked again, the memory of the bunker bleeding into this new silence. Then she saw him. Just a few feet away, sitting with his back against a moss-covered boulder, was Caleb Rowan older, rougher around the edges than she remembered, but unmistakably him. His jacket was torn at the sleeve, his face shadowed in firelight, and his eyes, they carried something he never had back in the academy, the weight of loss and the quiet strength that comes after. His head was tilted down, watching the dog curled at her side. Not just any dog. Blitz. She drew a breath. Unsteady. Raw. Blitz lay beside her with a stillness that broke her heart. His muzzle rested near her hip, eyes lifted, unblinking. As if even now he wasn't sure it was real. As if part of him feared that if he blinked, she might vanish again. Her lips parted. A whisper, hoarse and trembling. He found me. Caleb's head snapped up. He didn't speak, not right away. Just nodded. His voice, when it came, was low, as if anything louder might shatter the moment. Yeah, he did. Blitz inched forward, laying his head gently in her lap. He didn't bark, didn't move, just pressed his weight against her like he used to back when he was trained to stabilize her after high-stress operations. Back when she still believed in the system. Lana lifted a shaking hand, running her fingers through the coarse fur behind his ears. You're hurt, she whispered. He wouldn't leave without you, Caleb said. She looked up, locking eyes with him. In the flickering lantern light, tears caught in the corners of her lashes. I told them someone would come, that Blitz would find a way. Caleb leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He never stopped searching. Not once. Even when they tried to break him. Lana's voice cracked. They used him against me, Caleb. Showed me videos him chained, injured, drugged. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd erase him. Blitz let out a low, almost human sigh, pressing closer. I knew it was him in the fire, she whispered, the memory coming back in jagged flashes. They moved me after that raid. Drugged me. But I heard it the bark. I knew it was his. Caleb reached behind and handed her a small tin of water. She took it with trembling fingers, sipping slowly. When she lowered it, her voice was steadier, though her eyes were full. Why did you come, Caleb? You weren't on this case anymore. He exhaled through his nose, watching the creek for a beat before answering. I saw him. On the road. Burned, bound, but alive. I couldn't walk away. Lana nodded slowly. They have others, you know. Not just me. They're building something cruel, underground, twisting people, twisting dogs, all hidden behind uniforms and protocol. I've seen some of it, Caleb said. But not all. Not yet. A gust of wind stirred the pines. Blitz didn't flinch. Lana reached out, cupping his scarred muzzle in both hands. He remembers everything, doesn't he? Caleb nodded. Every turn, every voice, every scream. He led me to you. Tears slid freely down her cheeks now, soaking into Blitz's fur. "I thought I was already dead," she said, voice barely more than breath. "But he didn't." There was silence for a long moment. Not the empty kind, but the kind that heals, that wraps itself around pain and keeps it from unraveling too fast. Blitz lifted his eyes and met Caleb's. There was no doubt in that look. No command needed. Just a shared vow. Lana ran her fingers once more through Blitz's coat. "I want to see them pay," she whispered. Caleb stood slowly. "We will." He offered her his hand. She hesitated for half a breath, then took it. Her fingers were cold, but her grip held resolve. And beside them, Blitz stood as well, limping, worn, but unbroken. Together, they rose into the dark. Not just survivors, but a reckoning waiting to be delivered. The first light of morning spilled through the treetops like a secret unraveling. Mist clung low to the forest floor, curling around fallen limbs and half-buried tracks, as if trying to erase what had happened in the hours before. But some things could not be covered, not blood, not memory, and not the weight of those who survived. Caleb pushed through the last stretch of brush. Mud streaked down his jacket, breath shallow from exertion. Lana leaned heavily on his left side. Her frame weakened from sedation and weeks of captivity, but her steps were her own. Each one was a decision, a promise. Behind them, Blitz limped through the undergrowth, his gait uneven but determined. The old thermal blanket was now slung across his back like a makeshift cape, the edges darkened with soot. One side torn where he'd chewed through to free himself from the burning crate. His fur still reeked faintly of smoke and metal, but he was alive. And he hadn't stopped watching Lana since they left the compound. They moved together like something ancient and quiet like grief, traveling with purpose. Every few yards, Blitz would stop and glance back, ears flicked, nose high. Caleb understood that, look now, it wasn't just instinct, it was memory. Blitz remembered the way in, and he was making sure it stayed behind them. At the ridge, just where the trees opened to a clearing of crushed stone and bent grass, a pickup truck waited engine off, a gray tarp covering the bed. May stood beside it, arms folded against the cold, hair tied back, face unreadable. She didn't ask questions, just opened the passenger door and stepped aside. Caleb helped Lana into the seat gently, careful not to jar her still numb limbs. Her breath hitched once as she sank into the cushioning, but she said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on Blitz. The dog hesitated at the tree line, paw lifted mid-step. May knelt down, quiet and low. "Come on, boy." Blitz blinked. Then he moved one slow, limping stride after another, until his head touched her outstretched palm. Her fingers slid over the old scar above his eye, the one she'd cleaned days earlier when he was first brought in. "He's worse," she said to Caleb without looking up. He wouldn't leave her behind. May nodded once, then rose and retrieved the medical kit from the truck bed. "Get him in. We'll stabilize him on the way." And so, together, they lifted Blitz into the back seat, Lana's hand immediately resting on his back once he was inside. He didn't flinch, only sighed and curled beside her, muzzle pressing into the crook of her elbow. Caleb shut the door gently, the click muffled by the hush of morning. Only then did he allow himself a breath. "You saw the smoke?" he asked May, voice hoarse. "I saw the plume," she replied. 15 minutes ago. Place is gone." Caleb looked out across the distant tree line where the facility had stood or still burned. He imagined the heat still rising off twisted steel, the flames consuming every trace that could testify. But they'd gotten what mattered. Lana. Blitz. The truth, whispered in blood and concrete. "I counted 3 trucks moving in fast from the East Ridge," May continued. "They'll be swarming the place by now." "Good," Caleb said. "Let them clean their own ashes." They climbed into the truck, engine grumbling awake beneath May's practiced touch. The tires rolled over gravel, then onto the pitted dirt road that wound down through the valley. As they drove, the silence inside was deep, but not empty. Lana stared out the window, her fingers never once leaving Blitz's side. Caleb sat beside May, his body aching in places he didn't remember injuring, eyes red but alert. Finally, Lana spoke, her voice soft, like someone learning how to use it again. "Do you think they know?" May glanced at her in the mirror. "They will, if they haven't already. Then we don't have long. No, Caleb said, but we have enough. They drove past a faded trail sign, Larkspur Hollow, long rusted and half swallowed by ivy. Beyond that, the road split into three, and May took the far left route, heading west. Blitz shifted in his sleep, emitting a faint whimper. Lana adjusted her position, letting his head rest against her stomach. Caleb watched her in the mirror. The firelight that had once hollowed her cheeks was now replaced by something gentler resolve, yes, but also grace, the kind that only comes from making it through something unthinkable. May reached over and handed Caleb a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "It was taped under the passenger seat. Found it when I went to get the truck." Caleb unfolded it. A photocopy. Grainy. A list of names and coordinates. Some circled, others crossed out. At the bottom, written in Lana's handwriting, "If this reaches you, I'm not the only one. Find them. Free them." He swallowed hard. "I thought she was gone," he said, voice almost breaking. "But she wasn't," May replied. "Number." Caleb looked back again, his voice quiet. "Because he wasn't." They kept driving. The sun began to rise, not gold, not bright, but pale and watchful. And somewhere behind them, the ruins smoldered. But ahead was a different kind of fire, one that wouldn't go out until every last chain was broken. The air inside May's clinic was quiet, but not still. Rain whispered against the windows, soft and steady, like a metronome keeping time for the tension in the room. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. A kettle whistled and no one got up to silence it. May sat at her desk, sleeves rolled up, laptop open. Her eyes scanned one document after another, high-resolution images of blood analysis, tissue samples from Blitz, sedatives found in Lana's bloodstream, timestamps. Each piece surgically labeled, indisputable. Every click of her trackpad sounded like a nail being hammered into someone's future. On the other side of the room, Caleb stood leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. His shirt was still damp from the morning rain, the same rain that had soaked the ground as they'd left the facility behind. He hadn't said much since. Blitz lay curled at Lana's feet, wrapped in a clean blanket. The bullet graze on his shoulder was healing, but slowly. His eyes opened now and then, only to make sure she was still there. And she was. Lana hadn't spoken much either, except to confirm details for the report. She looked older now, not in years, but in the way people look when they've walked out of hell and still have to prove it existed. "This is everything," May said quietly, not turning around. "Medical analysis, voice logs, the GPS metadata on the photo you found. Even the shell casings from the raid match the model registered under the Black Ridge evidence locker." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "They used department weapons." On her, Caleb's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. May clicked a folder open, one labeled simply "For Aiden." Lana stirred slightly in the chair, the blanket over her shoulders slipping down one arm. "He'll believe it?" "He has to," May replied. "And if he doesn't?" "Then we release it all," Caleb said. "No more shadows." Lana looked down at Blitz. He stirred at her voice, lifting his head just enough to nuzzle her knee. Her hand rested on his head, fingers threading into the rough fur. He never stopped looking. Caleb pushed off the wall, stepped closer to the desk. "Neither did you." The room fell into silence again as May connected to the encrypted drive, a triple-layered backup system once used by Aiden Walsh, former cybercrimes agent turned whistleblower and now, quietly, a ghost in the federal web. "This channel won't stay open long," May murmured, checking the routing nodes. "He made it clear. One upload window. No second tries." She opened the secure folder and began dragging in the files. One by one, they loaded Lana's medical report, voice recordings of her last assignments, surveillance footage recovered from the Vaughn facility's server backup. She paused only once at the ledger. A list of shipments, dates, dog tags, human names, and at the very bottom, a signature. Deputy Chief Marcus Lyrey. Caleb saw it and turned away, biting the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted copper. May didn't speak. She simply uploaded it. The screen blinked. "Uploading to Node 3. Secured." And Lana closed her eyes, her fingers still resting on Blitz. "That's it. That's everything." "No," Caleb said quietly. Now we wait. May watched the upload bar tick forward 61%, 74%, 92%. When it hit 100%, the screen turned white. A message popped up. Transfer complete. Connection terminated. She exhaled, slow and quiet, as if letting go of something that had been sitting in her lungs for years. Blitz let out a low whine. They turned to him, and for the first time in hours, he tried to stand. His back legs shook, but Lana helped steady him, whispering softly, "Not yet, boy. Just rest." Caleb took a seat across from May and opened the folder on the table. Inside, a single, dog-eared photo. Lana in uniform, Blitz by her side, younger, straighter, the badge still polished. Caleb slid it across to May. He was hers, from the beginning. May stared at it for a long time, then said, "Then it makes sense why they wanted him gone." Caleb nodded. They tried to erase her by erasing him. Lana looked up. But they failed. "No," May said. "Not this time." Thunder rolled in the distance, low and long. It didn't belong to the rain. It was the kind that preceded storms big enough to tear through county lines. May reached for her phone and placed it on the table, screen down. "If Aiden doesn't respond in the next 6 hours," she said, "we go to Plan B." "Which is?" Caleb asked. "We leak it to every agency, every news outlet, simultaneously." "And Lyrie?" May looked up, her eyes flat. "Then Lyrie Burns." The room was still for a long moment. Then Lana finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "What if they come first?" Caleb turned to her. "Then they'll learn something real fast." He looked at Blitz, still at her feet, still watching the door. "You don't corner the kind of dog who's already been through the fire." May said nothing, but she reached across the table and quietly locked the front door. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old secrets. Rows of pew-stiff benches were packed with townspeople, reporters, and off-duty officers, some in uniform, some in plain clothes, all holding their breath. The seal of the state of Colorado gleamed above the judge's bench, but its gold edge seemed dull today, overshadowed by what the room carried: history, betrayal, and the chance, finally, for reckoning. Caleb sat in the second row, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. His right thumb still bore the faint scar from the trap in Black Ridge Woods, a reminder that pain didn't always shout. Sometimes it just lingered, quiet and constant. Blitz sat upright beside the witness box, his canine vest pressed and clean, the patch still bearing the faint scorch mark from Vaughn Industries. The courtroom had allowed his presence as an emotional support asset, but everyone in that room, including the judge, knew better. Blitz wasn't here to soothe. He was here as witness. The defense attorney had objected at first. "He's a dog," he'd sneered, eyes darting toward Blitz. "Not a citizen, not admissible." But the judge had looked down over his glasses and said simply, "That dog survived more than most men in this room. He stays." Now Blitz sat like a silent sentinel, ears forward, eyes on the accused, Deputy Chief Marcus Lyrie. Lyrie wore a tailored suit instead of his uniform. He looked smaller without the badge, like someone who'd borrowed the weight of power and was now shrinking under its return. His jaw clenched as Lana walked toward the stand. The room shifted. Every eye followed her. She didn't walk quickly. Her steps were steady, deliberate, like she knew every inch of the floor beneath her. But the limp was still there, slight, almost imperceptible, but real. She wore a navy blazer, her badge clipped to the belt beside her hip. Her hair had grown longer since the rescue, and the small silver scar near her temple caught the light. When she took the oath, her voice was clear. "I do." And the courtroom held its breath. The prosecutor approached slowly. "Detective Pierce, can you tell the court where you were for the 19 days prior to your extraction from the Vaughn Industries facility?" Lana nodded. "Held in an underground cell, sedated repeatedly, interrogated, sometimes restrained." "By whom?" She didn't pause. "By officers who served under the direct order of Marcus Lyrie." The murmur in the courtroom was immediate, sharp. The judge banged the gavel once. "Order." The prosecutor pressed on. "And how can you be sure?" "Because I heard his voice," Lana said, "on the radio, giving clearance codes, calling for erasure of asset K945, which is Blitz's ID. Blitz's ears perked slightly at his name. Caleb saw Lana's hand drop for a moment, just enough to brush his back. Did you ever interact with Lyrie personally during your captivity? No, Lana replied. That's how he works. Through layers, shadows, disposable people. But he signed the orders? Yes, and I have the ledger. With his name, with shipment schedules, his initials next to every erased badge number. The prosecutor paused. Detective, were you the only one being held? Lana's voice dropped. Number. There were others. 2 of them didn't make it. 1, I think they moved. And Blitz. Her throat tightened. She glanced down. He was separated from me. For reconditioning. They burned him, drugged him, tried to erase everything he'd ever been. Caleb closed his eyes. He found me anyway, Lana added, because that's who he is. Not just a dog, a partner, a pose, a witness. Blitz stood then, not in alarm, but like something inside him stirred at her voice. He walked forward 3 steps and sat at the base of the witness stand, placing himself between her and Lyrie. The courtroom froze. Even the judge didn't move. Lana looked down at Blitz, then back up at the jury. You asked if I was alone. I wasn't. Not for a second. The silence was deep, not empty, but heavy, like grief, like truth. The defense tried, of course, spoke of trauma, claimed the evidence was circumstantial, that voices on logs could be spoofed, that the ledger was conveniently found by someone with a known disciplinary mark, Caleb. But the room had heard enough. When the verdict came, it didn't take long. The judge re-entered. The 4 persons stood. The words were loud and clear. On the count of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, guilty. On the count of attempted murder, guilty. On the count of evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and abuse of authority, guilty. On all counts, guilty. Lyrie didn't shout, didn't flinch. He just sat there, the fabric of his suit suddenly too tight, the room too bright. Lana exhaled. Caleb stood, and Blitz for the first time that day barked once. The courtroom did not erupt. It didn't need to, because something larger than celebration moved through those walls. Justice, long delayed, had finally found its way to the front steps. As they exited the courthouse, sunlight broke through the rain-washed sky. A single ray caught the badge on Blitz's vest and turned it into a mirror. Lana leaned down, kissed the side of his head. You brought us home, boy. Caleb waited by the steps, and for the first time since the fire all those years ago, the one that had taken everything from him, he didn't feel like he was chasing a ghost. He was walking alongside something alive, and justice had a heartbeat. Ash Grove had always been a town of silences. Snow fell quietly, roofs aged without complaint, and people carried their grief like folded letters never sent. But that morning, with the courthouse verdict still echoing and the clouds finally parting, a different kind of silence filled the precinct courtyard, the kind that comes before something sacred. Rows of officers stood in full-dress uniform. Even the ones long retired showed up in coats and pins they hadn't worn in years. Children perched on their parents' shoulders. Reporters stayed respectfully behind the tape, lenses raised but voices hushed. At the center of it all stood a small wooden platform beneath the precinct flagpole. And on that platform, Caleb Rowan. He didn't wear his badge today, just his old winter jacket and the faint remains of a stitched scar across his knuckle. In his hand, a small silver medallion strung on navy blue ribbon. On its face, engraved with calm precision, for valor beyond orders. Beside him sat Blitz. His fur had begun to grow back over the worst of the burns. His left ear still had a notch, and the white patch over his ribs where they'd shaved and treated the wounds caught the light like a scar-turned beacon. He sat perfectly still, head high, tail motionless, watching the people, guarding them. Even now, Caleb cleared his throat. No microphone, no pomp, just the mountains behind him, the courthouse steps still damp from yesterday's rain, and the weight of everything Blitz had walked through. Some heroes don't wear uniforms, Caleb said, voice steady but low. Some don't speak our language, but they still understand right from wrong. A pause. His eyes flicked down to Blitz, then back to the crowd. 4 weeks ago, I found a dog in a fire, bound, abandoned, meant to die. And I thought that was the start of his story. I was wrong. He glanced toward the seated front row, where Lana sat shoulder in a sling, bruises fading, but her gaze unwavering. May beside her, and in May's hands, Blitz's old badge tag, recovered and repolished. Blitz had already lived more than most of us could imagine. He'd been trained, betrayed, reconditioned, and still, he remembered how to protect. Caleb stepped down from the platform and knelt in front of Blitz. "He ran into fire," he said softly, looping the medallion ribbon around the dog's thick neck. "And brought us back." The silence held. Then, as if something had been held back too long, came the sound of hands meeting. One clap, then another, then the slow, rising swell of applause. Not wild, not performative, but deeply felt, like people were clapping for more than a dog, for hope, maybe, for justice, for all the things they hadn't been able to say until now. Blitz didn't react at first. He just stood still. But when Caleb whispered, "You did it, partner," Blitz turned, nudged his head softly into Caleb's chest, and let out a quiet huff. Not a bark, not a whine, just breath. And the crowd stilled again, moved not by the noise, but the knowing. Lana came forward after the ceremony, kneeling beside Blitz. "You remember this, don't you?" she said, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "This place, these people." Blitz touched his nose gently to the sling on her shoulder, and Lana smiled through the tears. "Yeah, me too." Photographers snapped pictures. Someone from the Denver office handed Caleb a letter of commendation. But what mattered happened after. As people began to drift away, some shaking hands, some wiping their faces, a boy stepped forward, maybe 9, freckles across his nose, clutching a folded drawing in both hands. He looked up at Caleb, then at Blitz. "I drew this," he said, voice tiny. "It's Blitz in the fire, and you, and the lady. I hope it's okay." Caleb knelt, took the paper like it was made of glass. The drawing wasn't perfect, but the flames were there. And Blitz was in the center, colored with gray and black and a bold streak of red where the medallion now hung. Underneath, written in a child's careful hand, "The dog who didn't give up." Caleb swallowed hard. "It's more than okay." Blitz stepped forward, sniffed the boy's hand, then gently pressed his head into it. And just like that, Ashgrove exhaled. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet ways that mattered. A shoulder released. A breath held too long finally let go. The flag above the precinct flapped once. And in that moment, with snow melting off the eaves and the medallion catching morning light, the town knew healing had started. Not because justice had arrived on cue, but because a dog had remembered who he was and reminded them all what they could be. The first snow of December dusted the rooftops of Ashgrove like sifted flour, quieting even the distant hum of trucks along Highway 17. But at the edge of town, past the old sycamore grove, and behind what used to be May Whitmore's veterinary clinic, a different kind of warmth stirred. It began with a sign, carved by hand, hung beneath a cedar beam. "The Whitmore Center for Retired Canine Second, where loyalty is never forgotten." May stood by the entrance that morning, a soft knit scarf looped twice around her neck, hands stuffed deep into her coat pockets. She'd insisted the ribbon cutting be simple, no brass bands, no podiums, just the dogs and the people who remembered. And Blitz, of course. He stood by her side, the silver medallion from his ceremony now looped around a reinforced collar with navy trim. His gait had steadied over the weeks, though a slight limp remained quiet testimony to everything he had endured and still chosen to give. The center was modest, a single-story building, red timber siding, white-framed windows that let sunlight spill across the floors inside. But the heart of it wasn't the architecture, it was the feeling, the way it smelled faintly of pine shavings and oatmeal. The way the wind broke at the corners of the yard, as if even nature had learned to tread gently here. Inside, padded beds lined the main room, each with a small brass nameplate. Some dogs were already there, retired canines second from around the state. A German shepherd missing an ear, a yellow Labrador with cloudy eyes, a black Belgian Malinois who flinched at sudden sound but wagged his tail when children approached. May walked slowly down the hall, past the therapy room where veterans would soon begin their sessions and into the reading corner. It was her favorite place. A semicircle of beanbags, gently worn blankets, and a low shelf of books donated by the local library. Above it, A hand-painted sign in a child's looping handwriting. Stories for the ones who can't tell theirs. That was where Blitz lay now. A little girl sat cross-legged beside him, her wool hat slipping over her ears. In her lap, a book titled Brave Dogs, Brave Hearts, though she wasn't really reading. She paused between pages, sometimes turning one without a word, other times resting her small hand on Blitz's back as if the story could be felt through touch. Blitz didn't move, he just breathed, eyes half closed, steady, safe. Caleb had arrived not long after sunrise, quietly as ever. He didn't wear his uniform anymore, but he still checked the perimeter as he parked his truck. Old habits don't retire as quickly as men do. He stood in the doorway now, watching the room as if guarding it from ghosts. May approached him with 2 mugs of hot cider. She handed one over, her hand brushing his glove. "Still don't believe it's real?" Caleb sipped slowly. "Feels too good. It's supposed to." She smiled gently. "They've earned it. You all have." They stood like that for a long time, saying little, just listening to the rustle of pages, the shuffle of paws, the occasional soft bark that didn't startle anyone. Later that day, a group of veterans arrived from the neighboring county's VA center. One walked with a cane, another with a limp more in the soul than the legs. They settled on benches in the therapy yard, watching the dogs. One man retired. Sergeant Morales removed his glove and held it out to Blitz. "Name's Tom," he said, voice hoarse. "Mind if I sit?" Blitz moved forward without hesitation, pressed his head into the man's knee. And just like that, a conversation began, without words. May watched through the glass. "This," she whispered to herself, "is what healing looks like." She remembered the letter that had sparked all this, the donations that poured in after the trial, some from strangers who had followed Blitz's story online, some from old officers who hadn't spoken in years but sent checks with notes like, "For the dog who never gave up," or "Because he reminded me of my own." One donation came anonymously, just a cashier's check and a note scribbled in block letters. "We don't deserve them, but we can love them better." That night, as the center settled into its first full evening, Caleb returned with a heavy envelope tucked under his arm. He handed it to May. "What's this?" "A story," he said, "that Blitz wrote with his scars." Inside were printed transcripts, compiled files, photos. A full record of Blitz's service, the cover-up, the trial, and the healing. May flipped through them slowly, her eyes catching on a photo of Lana with Blitz resting beside her during recovery. In his eyes, something unshakable, not just survival, memory. "You planning to publish this?" "No," Caleb said. "You are." May looked up. He shrugged. "Someone has to tell it right." Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft and slow, layering the rooftop like a promise. Blitz stirred in his sleep, one paw twitching slightly as if still chasing something only he could see. But in this place, this quiet, warm place, filled with pages and paw prints, he was finally allowed to rest. And the town of Ash Grove, long burdened with silence, was learning, at last, how to remember out loud. The sun broke late over Ash Grove that morning, catching the frost still clinging to the edges of the Whitmore Center's windows. Light filtered in softly through the curtains, warm and golden, like honey poured slow over cold hands. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and browned butter. May stood at the stove, her hair up in a loose bun, flipping pancakes onto a plate already stacked high. Beside her, the old drip coffee maker murmured with quiet determination. The air was thick with a kind of stillness that didn't ask to be filled. At the corner table, Caleb poured maple syrup over his third pancake, a rare grin tugging at his usually unreadable face. Lana sat across from him, legs pulled up into her chair, hoodie sleeves covering her hands as she sipped from a chipped ceramic mug that said, "Dog hair is my glitter." Blitz was curled in his usual spot by the stone fireplace, the embers behind him still glowing from the early morning relight. His breathing was slow, rhythmic, one ear flopped gently over his paw, the other half raised like he was still listening, just in case. No one spoke for a while, not because there was nothing to say, but because nothing needed to be said. "I forgot how good pancakes could taste," Lana murmured eventually, voice half lost behind steam from her cup. That's because you used to eat protein bars with expiration dates printed in code, Caleb teased. She raised an eyebrow. Those kept me alive. He smiled softly. This brings you back. May slid into the seat next to Lana, setting down a bowl of fruit with a proud huff. You know, I once had a patient who only ate bacon and refused any other meat. Turned out he had a chicken allergy. German Shepherd. Stubborn as hell. Lana laughed. You're saying Blitz is picky? May gestured toward the fireplace. I'm saying he's earned the right to be. The laughter came easily after that. The kind that lifts from somewhere deep, not forced, but found, like breath after water. There was something sacred about mornings like this. Not in the grand, hymn-sung sense, but in the tiny things. The way Caleb stirred his coffee with the handle of his spoon. The way Lana stole blueberries from May's side plate without asking. The way Blitz's tail thumped softly against the hardwood floor, just once, when someone said his name in passing. Outside, the frost began to melt along the edges of the windows. A soft drip, drip, drip as icicles gave way to warmth. Inside, Lana glanced toward the fireplace and set her mug down. She stood, walked over, and knelt beside Blitz. Her fingers moved gently across his fur, tracing the patch just above his shoulder where the scars were still visible in certain light. You remember this room, don't you? She whispered, voice meant only for him. You knew I was here, even when I didn't. Blitz didn't stir, but his tail brushed twice against the ground. A quiet affirmation. Caleb watched them, eyes softening at the edges. He didn't interrupt. He just leaned back in his chair and listened not to the words, but to what they meant. May returned with more syrup and napkins, setting them down before she moved to open the window just a crack. Crisp air slipped in, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant smoke from a neighbor's chimney. I used to think healing would come like lightning, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Fast, loud, immediate, but it's not. Caleb turned to her. It's pancakes and dog hair, huh? May smiled. Exactly. They lingered there through the morning. No alarms, no phone calls. Just the sound of cutlery clinking, Blitz's occasional sigh, and the low hum of a local radio station playing something old and slow. At one point, Lana pulled out a faded Polaroid from her coat pocket. She set it on the table. It showed a younger version of herself in uniform, kneeling beside Blitz in his prime. Both of them covered in dust, grinning. Caleb leaned over to look. I found it, she said, in a box they never meant me to see. Guess someone thought I'd forget. You didn't, he said simply. She shook her head. Neither did he. May reached over, placed her hand on the photo gently. We should frame that. For the center wall. Let the kids know where the quiet strength comes from. The photo stayed there for the rest of breakfast, catching sunlight and memory. As the clock in the hallway struck 10, the spell began to dissolve, slowly, not sadly, just naturally. Like mist receding from the ground when the sun is sure enough to take its place. May stood first, collecting plates with the precision of someone who'd learned to make peace through repetition. Lana helped clear the table. Caleb took the fire poker and stirred the coals until the orange glow returned. And Blitz, he shifted in his sleep, stretched out one paw toward the edge of the rug, then settled again, eyes closed, ears relaxed. Dreaming, perhaps, of mountains, or meadows, or the scent of someone he loved. The center had many rooms. But this quiet, worn kitchen with its uneven chairs and mismatched mugs felt like the beating heart of all of them. And for one morning at least, the world outside could wait. The wind had changed in Ashgrove. You could feel it in the way people paused longer at crosswalks to pet the dogs waiting beside them, or how the evening light seemed to stay just a little longer over the porch of the Whitmore Center. It wasn't loud. Healing never was. But it was there, in the quiet. Outside the center, a bronze plaque had been placed near the flower beds. Simple, earnest, to Blitz, the dog who carried fire and never let it burn us. Caleb Rowan stood before it, his hands deep in his coat pockets, the wind threading through his sleeves. A soft rustle of dried leaves stirred near his boots. He'd been coming here every Sunday morning, always at the same hour, long before the town woke. Not for ceremony, not for closure, just to be near the truth. Blitz lay not far from the plaque, dozing beneath the bench. His fur had grown back in most places, but the burn scars across his flank were permanent raw patches of memory the world could see. And somehow, It suited him. He didn't hide what he'd been through. He wore it like a story no one else could tell. Caleb crouched beside him, one hand absently, finding the space between his ears, rubbing gently. "Hey, partner." Blitz's eyes opened halfway, then closed again. The faintest thump of his tail brushed the gravel once. "I kept thinking justice would look like courtrooms," Caleb said softly, as if speaking to the breeze. "A gavel, a headline. But that wasn't it. Justice was this. You. Still breathing." The dog didn't move, but something shifted in the silence between them, that unspoken knowing, that steady rhythm of shared survival. "They'll write reports," Caleb went on. "Maybe even books one day. And they'll say you tracked the scent, you found Lana, you stopped the traffickers. All true. He posed, his voice dropping lower. "But what they won't understand, not really, is what it cost you to stay brave in the fire. What it means to run into the heat when everyone else is running out." The memory never left him. That night, at Vaughn Industries, the flames licking through the steel beams, the shipping container rattling as Blitz barked once hoarse and desperate, the weight of his body in Caleb's arms as he carried him out, wrapped in a thermal blanket, lungs seared but eyes alert. And then, that same dog, barely breathing, nudging Caleb toward the hatch underground, refusing to stop. It wasn't just loyalty. It was a kind of sacred defiance. He didn't survive for himself. He endured for those who couldn't. "I read something once," Caleb said, his hand still resting against Blitz's scarred shoulder, "that some fires aren't meant to destroy, they're meant to reveal, like a forest after a burn. What stays, what matters." Blitz let out a low, contented exhale. Not a sigh, a letting go. May's voice called gently from the porch. "Coffee's ready." Caleb turned. She stood barefoot on the wood, sweater sleeves too long, mug in hand. She didn't need to say anything else. She never did. "I'll be in soon," he called back, then looked down again. "Go ahead," he whispered to Blitz. "I'll catch up." The dog didn't move, just rested his head back on his paws, as if saying, "You've got this. I'll wait." Caleb straightened slowly, eyes lingering on the plaque one more time. It wasn't flashy, just a name, a line of gratitude, a marker for something words could never really capture. He remembered the night Blitz stopped barking, not because he was tired, but because he'd said enough, because the world finally heard him. He remembered Lana's hand on Blitz's neck, tears falling as she whispered, "He found me." He remembered May's voice cracking as she stitched up the burns and said, "You don't get many like him." And he remembered the eyes. That was the part that stayed. Blitz never needed to speak, never needed to be commanded or praised. His eyes carried the weight of everything. Sorrow, fire, the haunting silence of cages, the smoke, thick courage of those who run toward pain to pull someone else out. Some angels don't have wings. Some have scorched fur, torn ears, and eyes that remember every scream and still choose kindness. Blitz was never trained to save lives. He chose to, and that choice again and again made all the difference. Back at the porch, May watched him for a while before slipping inside. The door creaked open, then fell shut behind her with a soft click. Caleb turned to follow, his boots crunching lightly over the path. Halfway there, he paused and looked back. Blitz was still under the bench, barely visible in the shifting morning light. But his presence was undeniable, like a sentinel made of ash and hope, still keeping watch long after the danger had passed. And Caleb realized he hadn't saved Blitz that night. Blitz had saved him in the fire, yes, but more importantly, after, in the days that followed, in the moments of doubt, in the quiet, flickering places of the soul where only something pure and wordless could reach. And he would carry that fire forward, always. When we open our hearts to a dog, especially a steadfast soul like a German shepherd, we're reminded that loyalty isn't a word. It's a warm body at our side, through fire and quiet dawn alike. These companions feel our tremors before we speak, celebrate our small joys, and, in their unspoken way, teach us how courage can wear fur and a wagging tail. If today's story stirred something in you, maybe a memory of a dog who once waited at the door, or the gentle hope of a new friend yet to arrive, you might enjoy a little guide I keep on hand. It's a collection of simple moments and trust-building games that help me deepen my bond with Blitz. I tucked the download link in the video description. Take a peek only if it feels right for you. Either way, give your pup an extra ear scratch tonight. They understand more than we know, and every shared heartbeat is a gift we get to keep.